Thank you, Ms. Conn. So before we formally start the meeting, I'm going to go through each voting member of the board present and then to other attendees. I think it's important that we start to bring a clear differentiation between voting members of the board and attendees. So I will be going to each of you in turn to confirm that you can hear and be heard because this is a legal requirement for virtual meetings, and where possible, please also have your video switched on so that members of the public will be able to see you as well as hear you. So the first voting member of the board that I've got is Mark Willimont. I don't know if he's engaged in other activity or if he can reply.
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you and hear you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Willimont. And Councillor James Evans from Powys, voting member of the board. Are you present and can you hear and be heard? Do we have an alternative?
Here. We've got Councillor Hywin Hume, who I can see
All right.
is in attendance. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morris. And Ms. Morris, while you're there, can you also hear and be heard and you're happy with reception? And okay, so do we have Mark Wachnowski from Welsh Water?
Yes, I'm here.
Mark, thank you, lovely. You can hear and be heard? Simon Evans, Wyask Foundation.
I can hear and be heard.
Thank you, kindly, that's lovely. And Sarah Faulkner from the NFU, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
And we can hear you, that's lovely. And Helen Dale from the Country Landowners Association. Do you have Helen Dale here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ah, that's smashing, thank you. Can hear you too. Dave Throop, the Environment Agency.
Good afternoon, Chair. Yes, I can hear you. I have been having broadband problems this morning, so if I do drop out, so if somebody could wave at me or somehow let me know.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Throop. That's lovely. We have David Lee. Is he present from NRW?
Yes, I'm here, Chair, and I can hear and be heard. Hopefully, my manager Anne Weedy is struggling to join in, so she's trying her best. Okay.
Thank you. And Aled Jones. We have Aled Jones, FUW. Okey-dokey. Joanna Redgewell, Natural England. Present, can you hear and be heard? Do we have a substitute from Natural England?
I think Joanna is coming, Felissa.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Mary.
I'll chase that up. I'll just email her the Zoom link again.
Okay. Mary Albright is our new member from HCILG. So welcome, Mary. I know you're in the room, and I could just confirm that you can hear. That's marvellous. Thank you very much. Helen Stace from Herefordshire Wildlife Trust.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Marvellous. I can hear you. That's splendid. Thank you.
Lovely.
And Christopher O'Brien from Brecon Beacons.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. That's lovely. And I can hear you. So now I will go through those are the voting board members. And I'll now go through the other attendees at a clip, I hope. Kevin Bishop, the Development Manager.
Yes, Chairman, I can hear and see you.
Thank you very much. Samantha Banks, NDP Team Leader.
Yes, Chair, I can see and I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Liz Duberly, Natural Environment Manager, Herefordshire Council.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bethany Lewis, Flood Officer.
Afternoon, Chair.
Hi, Beth. Thank you. Abby Sanders, Senior Ecologist. Can you hear and be heard?
Hello, yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kevin Singleton, Forward Planning. Hear and be heard.
Hi, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Marvellous, thank you. And Herefordshire Council members, Councillor Chowns, Cabinet Member. Can you hear?
Yes, thank you. I can hear and see.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harrington. Is he present? Councillor Marsh. Councillor Phillips.
Roger has emailed to say that he is in the waiting room, Melissa. I don't know if other people are struggling to be admitted by the host. But
Oh, okay, so maybe they're still coming through potentially. Okay.
Yeah.
And perhaps Councillor Milne is as well then.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in now.
All right, but if we could just, hello, Councillor Phillips, can you hear and we can
I can't
hear you?
but I'll mute myself now.
Thank you. So Richard Pitts from Paris. Is Richard here?
He's not here. No, again,
No,
it's
he's
Peter
not here.
Morris, so I'm here. Okay.
Okay. Councillor Hume from Paris is here. Sharon Elwood, Welsh Water, I think was did send an apology.
No, I'm here, Alyssa, till 3:30.
Okay. All right. Oh, that's marvellous. Fantastic. Kate Speak Adams from Wyask Foundation. Can you hear? Are you here? Jenny Gamble from the Environment Agency.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I can hear and see everyone.
Thank you. Has Anne Weedy managed to get in yet?
No, she's just asked me if I can invite her, but I can't do that. We don't have Zoom on our system.
No, I dare say that.
I'll send it again to her.
Thank you ever so much.
Hayley Fleming, Natural England. Jim Hicks from HCILG. Jim coming in?
Yes, he's here somewhere.
He's here somewhere, okay.
I can see you, Melissa.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry,
there he is.
I was muted. Sorry about that.
That's all right. You can hear now. We can hear you, so that's splendid. Andrew Nixon.
May I give his apologies, please?
You can, Helen. Thank you. Prophet Simmons, Brecon Beacons. Is there anyone that I've missed out?
Councillor Milne.
Oh, Councillor Milne's here. Hello.
Hello, Chair.
Confirm that I can hear you and you can hear me, I understand. So
I can hear you.
Splendid. Fantastic.
Chair,
do we
hello.
still have,
oh, sorry,
movement?
it's Gail Davis Walsh from the Wireless Foundation.
Oh, hello there.
Hi there.
Hi, one more to you from the NFU. It's Ian Ludgate speaking. I came in late, sorry.
That's all right. Oh, hello.
Okay. I think if it helps, Councillor, there's 7 people in the waiting room who probably can hear us. So we got Christine Hugh Jones, that's CPRW.
Yep.
March is planning at Gmail. I think that's Helen Hamilton.
Yeah.
Alison Caffin, who's CPRW and Cardiff University, I think. Libya B. Tom, which I see from an early email, is Tom Tibbet, I think it was. Oakland's Farm Eggs Limited. I'm presuming that's one of our farming community. A weird one just saying M280922. I don't know if that's a board member or not. And then we got Margaret's iPad again. I don't know who that is. So I'm assuming, and we got Joanna Redgewell, who I'll admit she's Natural England.
Right, that's splendid. Thank you. Yes.
So I would say if anyone could hear this in the waiting room, if they're actually one part of the board, please can they email myself? And then just if you could identify yourself, it's difficult from your email address to work out who you are.
Mark, they won't be able to hear you in the waiting room, but I can drop them a message via the chat.
You could do that way then. Yeah, I thought they might be watching the live stream. Okay.
Right. That's so. But could you let me know when Joanna Redwell's in the room, please?
I think she should be here because she's not in the waiting room anymore.
Okay. Just make sure that she can hear and
yes,
be heard.
Yes, she is. Yeah, she's there.
Okay.
She's on
So
mute at the moment.
Joanna Redwell, can you just unmute and confirm that you can hear and we can hear you?
Right, got there. Hello.
Fantastic. Hello
Sorry.
and welcome. Thank you.
Got there eventually.
Well done, brilliant. So there will be other officers who will come into the meeting as and when required. I won't introduce them all now because we won't get the meeting done. So thank you. So I'm now going to formally open the meeting. The agenda papers, other information are available for public viewing, have been circulated already. And please contact Jane Little if you need a copy. The council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making an official recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available via the council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible, keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Please remember that others are permitted to film, photograph and record our meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. In line with normal practices, all microphones apart from mine have been placed on mute. When called on to speak, your microphone will be unmuted, and once you're finished, it will be muted. When colleagues wish to speak, please use the raise hand icon. I will then invite you to speak in turn. Please remember to lower your hand after you have spoken. And if you can't find the raise hand icon, please indicate with your physical hand, but be aware that because we have so many people present, it's very difficult to see everybody simultaneously. So if possible, please use the virtual hand. It does ensure much smoother running of the meeting. There will be a vote during this meeting, which I will take with probably a named vote rather than trying to do a poll. So just to try and keep that relatively simple. So are there any questions about the procedures before we continue with the agenda? Right, marvellous. So apologies for absence. Have any apologies been notified to the clerk?
Chair, I've had an apology from Nick Reed.
Thank you. And are there any other apologies? We have one. Andrew Nixon. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. All right, so agenda item 2, minutes of the last board meeting of the 9th of July and matters arising. So I'll just have there were a couple of actions that I noted in the minutes, principally an action for Anne Weedy, item 6, NRW report, the development in Wales impacting upon the SSC in England. Could that then result in the type of action in Wales currently experienced on the Lug catchment in Herefordshire action? And we agree to take the question away and come back to the board with a response. Do we have a response from NRW on that?
Can we cover it in our? Can we cover it in our section later, please, Chair?
That's absolutely, Missy. That would be absolutely fine. Quite happy to take responses later in the meeting. There was another one. Member training, virtual seminars. Mr. Singleton, we're going to take that away.
Yeah, can we cover that? I think there's an item on the board for that specifically later as well. Yeah.
All right. Okay. And I think Mr. Throop was going to update the board about abstraction, will that also be forming part of your report later in the meeting?
No, Chair. I'm mortified when I saw that. I've tried to get an update, but unfortunately our water resources person is away. What I would suggest, if you're agreeable, is perhaps we bring it back to the next meeting and we do a presentation on abstraction. It is clearly a slightly separate subject. So I would propose that if that's agreeable.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Right, that's fine. I think, has anyone got any questions or issues they want to raise about the 9th of July notes? Well, we're happy to agree with them. Chris O'Brien, you have a hand up.
Thank you. Just a note, spelling of my name is IEN rather than IAN
right
on the notes. And I'd requested that the Brecon Beacons National Park Authority be included in any discussions between planning authorities, and we've since here had no contact. So just to report on that.
Righty-ho, thank you. We can make a note of that and see if we can get an action. That would be great. You can pop your hand back down now. Thank you. Thanks.
And I can take that as an action, Chair. So it's Mark William. I know that Powys and Herefordshire are meeting. I think we're next meeting on the 14th of October from memory. I can see if you wish to be part of that as well. That will be concerning cross-border SAC issues.
Okay, yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Right, so we're all content. Voting members of the board, I think we'll go with a show of physical hand to the camera just to accept these minutes. Any objections? Marvellous. Okay, so agenda item 3, presentation of the Technical Advisory Group, TAG recommendations and appended papers. Who's taking that one forward? Is that Mr. Throop?
I'm going to take that. It's Jenny Gamble.
Oh, hello, Jenny. Marvellous.
Hello. Am I okay to make a start?
If you would, that would be splendid. Thank you.
Okay. The last Technical Advisory Group meeting took place on the 15th of September. And I'll just do a quick run through of what was discussed and any outcomes from that. So each organisation did a normal update at TAG, and that will be covered later on this afternoon in these agenda items. We've had a new addition to the Technical Advisory Group. So Mary Albright has joined the TAG group to represent the Herefordshire Construction Industry Lobby Group. And I know she's here today at this board meeting as well, so that's great. The action plan draft that was produced was discussed at the last board meeting, and that was further discussed and finalised at the TAG meeting on the 15th of September. So it's had several additions and it's been sent round, so everybody on this should have access to a copy. Changes include there's some source apportionment pie charts looking at phosphates from different sectors, and they're done for 3 areas of the Y, so the upper Y, the lower Y and the lug. They've been included in the action plan now. There is new information in there from the Environment Agency monitoring review that took place in June 2020, such as looking at flexible monitoring for going forward on our monitoring for the rest of this year and next year. There's a lot of new measures in the table from the papers that were presented to the board meeting in July. So different organisations had papers in July that included new measures, and they are now in the action plan in the table towards the end of the action plan. Some of these measures include integrated wetlands, voluntary agreements with farmers to reduce phosphate use, and also the interim phosphate delivery plan that's led by Herefordshire Council. Some of these measures have got quantifiable phosphate reduction figures in the action plan, such as investment from Welsh Water at their sites, and phosphate reductions from integrated wetlands can be quantified as well, because we know volumes going in to wetlands, and there's been enough research to show how effective the wetlands are at removing phosphate. There is also a possibility to produce some figures on phosphate reduction for taking land out of production. However, a lot of the measures that are in the action plan are harder to quantify. So some of the measures in there don't have sort of numerical figures allocated to them. These include measures such as providing advice to land managers and things like community engagement. And although we can't quantify those so easily, it's really important that they are in the action plan, because they're important for long-term catchment management, and they do need to be in the plan. TAG going forward will continue to look at the gaps that we need to fill between the phosphate that's being removed and can be quantified, and any phosphate that still needs to be removed to get us under the level needed to preserve the SAC. And the only other update I've got is the monitoring dashboard, which is produced primarily for the board to look at, which gives information such as housing data, pollution incident data, and numbers of farm visits and things from a variety of different organisations. That is in the process of being updated at the minute. And once all the information has been received and all the figures have been collated, that will be back online. And I would say that will be definitely back online within the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. Sorry about my dog. Thank you very much. Does anyone got any questions for Jenny? Yes, Mary Albright.
Thank you, Jenny. Obviously, because I only joined the advisory group the day before the meeting, I didn't have a chance to digest all of the documents. I've just got one question, and I think I have asked you before, so try and practice your surprise face with the question. But if lots of the measures that are approaching the diffuse source factor are voluntary, can they actually be included in the nutrient management plan as it's being revised?
The action plan includes a mixture, so it does include, you're right, it does include things like voluntary agreements for farmers to reduce phosphate use. It does also include some regulatory and enforceable actions as well. So there is a section in there on how Environment Agency and NRW will sort of continue with our regulation of relevant legislation. So there is a mixture, but we do accept that some of the measures are voluntary, and also the take up of things like advice that is given. You know, some people will take that advice and, you know, put that into sort of on the ground changes, and other people may not. So there is, you're right, there is a mixture, and some of it is voluntary. But I would think it would be a shame to not include the voluntary things, because there is quite a lot, there's a lot going on with different organisations.
I think we need to try and work out if there's a way of making those voluntary actions more quantifiable so that they become scientific certainty or evidence, because otherwise the gap that's been produced through the Welsh Water and infrastructure improvements won't close, or even if it does close, we'll have no way of evidencing it through a plan. And if we don't have scientific certainty, the plan can't be put in place. So it just seems that the voluntary measures need to be narrowed down. I agree that there are some voluntary measures that will never be quantifiable, but there must be some that we can put figures to and suggest reductions will be delivered by. Otherwise, that gap is never going to be closed, I don't think.
Can I suggest that so we also have the plan as the next item on the agenda, that there's opportunity to sort of mine out the specifics in the plan at that point as well. Okay, so Sarah Faulkner, NFU, have a hand up.
My question was in relation to the plan. So do you want to cover that now or under the next item?
I'm happy either way. I would say probably this is, since this relates to the tag rather than the plan. Obviously, it's, you know, the relationship with the tag producing the plan. But if it's about the plan as it is now, then probably the time to discuss that would be in the next item on the agenda, if that's agreeable to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Dave Throop.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's appropriate as well. I was just going to answer Mary, really, in terms of it gets to the heart of what we're trying to do here. And we're trying to do two things, aren't we? We've got an immediate situation with the failure of the SAC and to get it to within compliance and to hopefully relieve some of the restrictions we've got on. But remember, the overall nutrient management plan is about doing the right thing for the Rivers Wye and Lug over a long period of time. And I think some of those less measurable actions are still really important in terms of the way that we manage the whole catchment going forward. So, you know, I'm certainly very keen to keep them all in there.
Thank you, Dave. Right, so I think probably we'll find that the next agenda item is the one that we'll have a lot of discussion around. So I just want to make sure that we've got the, you know, all the time that we need for that discussion. So I'll draw the tag discussion to a close and go to agenda item 4, decision of the board in relation to the action plan proposed by the tag. Hopefully at the end of this agenda item, we'll be in a position to take a vote to support the plan or not, or perhaps support it with provisos or proposed changes that might happen. Since it is an iterative and live document, it can bear that. So I think if you know, with the indulgence of the board, I'll pick up a little bit on the point that Mary Albright was making, that the previous iteration of the plan to this iteration of the plan, what we need is to elevate certainty within the plan. And the action plan, as I think as Jenny Campbell pointed out, you know, it does deliver some actions which have clear phosphate reduction outcomes and targets that can be met. However, there's not quite a lot, I think, what it actually described as the primary approach to agricultural diffuse, which is now, we know, closer to 70% or thereabouts of the source apportionment, is still heavily reliant on voluntary measures, which it is my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected here, but it's my understanding that Natural England do not feel that voluntary measures are of a sufficient level of certainty to pick up any gapping, which inevitably there will be. So therefore, this does create a bit of a problem in my mind for the plan and what it needs to be doing at this point. Now, since we haven't all just turned up, the plan had a previous iteration, and that had a number of voluntary actions, advice and support and so on and so forth, you know, underpinning it. I would have thought that by now, some 6 years on, we'd have a sense of what the outcomes of that activity have been. So whilst it's not possible to, from this point, say this will produce it, it should be possible, I would have thought, looking at what has happened and whether or not that has produced a reduction in agricultural diffuse pollution within the catchment, to know whether or not the voluntary measures that were such a major part of the previous iteration of the plan offer a degree of certainty to Natural England, and indeed, you know, just generally, I think we all want the same thing. We all want to see a river that is in a good state of health. So that's a question that I have about, you know, around these voluntary measures and how sturdy are they, and do we then perhaps need to increase the emphasis on regulatory measures, because that's possibly more quantifiable, and have some clear determination to create something that can that we can rely on and that we can incorporate within the plan and view with a degree of certainty. So that would be my kind of first general point. We have things in the plan about we will monitor and assess the impact of the voluntary measures. Well, what have we been doing up to this point? Do we not know? So I'll leave that one hanging. Does anyone want to answer that for me?
I think Joanna wants to answer it for you, Alyssa.
That would be marvellous. Joanna, come on in. You'll have to unmute, sorry.
Hello.
Marvellous. There we go.
Hello.
Splendid.
Sorry, I can't work out how to raise my hand electronically on the screen. But yes, just to say that in Natural England, we are looking into this actually. We believe that there are some aspects of the voluntary measures that will be able to provide some certainty through the plan. So I think measures have been put in place that are more permanent, for example. So I think there is some scope here actually, and we're just working through this in consultation with legal at the moment. So right. I am happy to take away an action on that if it helps.
That'd be really, really helpful. Yes. Do you have any idea of the sort of timeline that you're working to with your legal on that?
Well, I actually saw a response today. We just haven't digested it. So the conversation.
Okay, so imminently.
Yeah, early in next week, a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Oh, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you very much. Dave, you still got your hand up. Is that left over from before? You want to talk again about?
No, sorry, Chair. It's left over. I mean, seeing as you've opened the door, I'd have to agree with your assessment in terms of the way things have happened over the last 5 years or so. We have all invested a lot of effort in terms of the voluntary measures side of things. The results are phosphate levels are not declining. All the evidence suggests that is the case. So I think you're right on there. It would be great to explore with Natural England how big that gap, how much we can close that gap through other measures. Clearly, the Dŵr Cymru investment is getting us quite close, according to all the monitoring on the modelling on the lugs. So there is a relatively small way to go. So I would advocate that we try to continue that debate and see how much we can close that gap with the measurable bits we've got, like the wetlands and maybe some of the some reversion type stuff, and see how close we can get there.
The issue again is about having an approach that's long term and sustainable and strategic, and that if we look at the way the source apportionment has moved over the last 6 years. And yes, we can say, well, improvement has come about due to the £50 million of investment from Dŵr Cymru and the £2 or £3 million that will be invested from Heritage Council and all the great efforts of the construction industry in their own offsetting. But this is all on the now smaller part of the apportionment, and ultimately that's not going to that cannot continue to fix the problem if the other part of the apportionment continues to increase. So we need to embed now not a reliance on what Dŵr Cymru and others are doing for the point source pollution, but rather embed something that is reliable and brings certainty to the agricultural diffuse side of the apportionment. It seems to me that's the really crucial thing. We've got to get that clear and to a degree of certainty. So I see you, Mary, but I have some blue hands, so I'll go to Helen Stace first.
Okay, thanks, Liz. So I just really want to endorse everything that you've said. We definitely don't seem to have made the progress that we would have expected in 6 years with the voluntary measures. I think the conversation we had at the last meeting about the regulatory approach was very relevant to this, and I think, you know, we do need to keep that on the table and keep the pressure up on that. And it seemed to me at the end of the day, the only way to really address this is for people like the Wildlife Trust to actually buy land and take it out of arable. Thank you, Helen. And indeed, I think that would be one of those quantifiable and measurable actions that would produce something. So Helen, if you could just take your hand down now, that would be brilliant. And Simon Evans from WASC Foundation.
Hi, Chair. Yes, two things I'd just like to add. One of the things that I'm working on at the moment is with Gail is a proposal for green recovery to remodel Farmscoper based on regulatory compliance, because Farmscoper assumes relatively high regulatory compliance, and if we take actual regulatory compliance, then we can start to remodel the situation properly. The other thing, I raised this at the last meeting, but for those who weren't at the Catchment Partnership meeting that we had in March, there was a pretty sobering presentation from Paul Withers at the REFOS project, which was suggesting that we've got two trains running into each other at high speed at the moment, which is over application of phosphate to land, combined with climate change, reducing the buffering capacity of soils. You can't underestimate the amount of phosphate that's in our soils. It's huge. It's orders of magnitude greater than what's in rivers or life. And if that starts to free up due to climate change and buffering capacity being exceeded, then we have got an issue. And it's quite important that that bit of science, when it is published, is circulated widely, and farmers take approach of it, because there's going to be quite a lot of phosphate in pores in soil structure that needs to be uptaken by the crop rather than leaching into the watercourses.
So Simon, take your hand down. Thank you. Sarah Faulkner from the NFU.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a point about the action plan, and it's changed somewhat since we saw it at the TAG meeting, and you've got the inclusion of the 3 pie charts showing showing source apportionment. And the question I'd like to ask, because it's not clear from the paper, is those pie charts, is that showing the current situation, or is that showing the situation that's based on the projected situation after the AMP7 investments? Because I think that's quite important. So is that current source apportionment, or source apportionment after water quality improvements have been made by the water sector? That really needs to be clarified, because I think the one thing that, you know, farmers will want to see is that we're dealing with the situation as things are now. Otherwise, it's quite confusing as to where the baseline is. And we also need to be clear that, because even though the source apportionment has changed, it doesn't mean that the overall loading from agriculture is increasing. And I think we need some clarity on that within the plan. And that is really important in terms of getting farmers to buy into this plan and to build upon the voluntary measures that they've already implemented.
Okay, I think that's some very good points there. Thank you. So actually, Jenny, can we just get a response about the what does the pie chart show?
Yeah, that's a good point, Sarah. It shows those are the pie charts that were brought to the last board meeting in July, and they're the ones that are after the Welsh Water work. So, but I can put an explanation on that by those pie charts to make it clearer. And I also agree with your other point that there needs to be some explanation, because although the proportion of phosphate from different sectors is changing, that does not automatically, it doesn't mean that the actual amount of phosphate is changing. So there will be I can put some explanation on that for you.
I think it would be very helpful for me, and I think just generally for everyone's understanding of the situation. When I saw the pie charts, I thought, well, you know, yeah, but I think Sarah's absolutely right. There's a lot of information that's lacking there, and that we probably need to have a pie chart that says this is where we were, and a pie chart to say this is where we are, and a pie chart to say this is where the known knowns take us to, which hopefully will then identify the gap. And that seems to me to be useful. And so that would be something for us to consider, that would be we would approve this with the proviso that those pie charts come back with more information underpinning them. I don't want to delay the plan. I don't think anyone wants to do that, but I think that the point made is a good one. And the very striking visuals of that need some explanation, but I think also historical and amount of phosphate and apportionment, if that's possible. Right, Chris O'Brien, Brecon Beacons. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, having first received this form of wording on Monday evening, brought it immediately to the attention of our Chief Executive Officer, given its significance. And given the wording of the plan, we concluded that we really want to take it through our membership and go through it with them in detail to let them understand or try and work out the significance of it. The plan as presented is got difficulties with the coherence and consistency within it. There's conflicting statements as to desired economic growth in Herefordshire and Powys, and variously just in Herefordshire. There's uncertain statements. I'm uncertain what favourable condition status even means in relation to a River Wye SAC. The documents presented in the narrative as of the River Wye Nutrient Management Plan Board's ownership, yet it's badged NRW, EA and NE, who's a responsible authority here for this plan. Given it's an update, I would like to see the screening assessments for it under the habitats regs. Not necessarily the full appropriate assessment, but just a screening assessment of it. So yeah, just to sum up, there's significant concerns with the way it's presented currently, and we certainly wouldn't be able to vote in favour of it today, but we'd like to certainly have the opportunity to work with the tag better on it to improve it and ensure it's coherent and consistent throughout.
Thank you. Does anyone want to reply to Chris on any of those points? Which it's quite a wide scope of points you've raised, which might be better kind of, given a written response.
Could I come in, Chair? Sorry, it's Mark Willimont.
Of course, Chris Willimont, yeah.
I'm not clear whether or not the National Parks Authority were invited to the TAG meeting. That would have been the time, I suppose, to have flagged up those concerns. Perhaps Chris could confirm.
Yeah, we're not invited to the TAG meeting, no.
No, so perhaps okay. We need to invite National Park Authority. I think we tried to keep it a fairly small base. There are 5 LPAs, local planning authorities, aren't there, on the SAC catchment. We don't tend to get responses from the Forest of Dean and Monmouthshire, but it's clear that the National Parks Authority do want to be involved. And I think we just need to take that on board when we call TAG meeting. I can ensure that future invites take that into account, because obviously there's a lot of wisdom there, and they are, National Park Authority potentially feeding into the upper section of the Wye. So that's very, very, very relevant, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it would be really great to have that level of involvement. I'd say, again, I think one somewhat relies on this document, particularly this stage, remaining very, very much a live document, which sort of sounds like we in a sense we never get to a point where we go, this is the document, but I think right now there's a lot of interest and a lot of new expertise and people kind of wanting to feed in, and there's a lot of learning going on, and it is quite a dynamic process. So I will absolutely hold by my belief that this is a live document and that therefore we might approve it today as a line in the sand, but we will be looking to improve it tomorrow, almost instantly. Growing it and bringing our learning to bear on it. Right. Oh, hang on a minute. I seem to have lost my list of participants. Sorry. So Mary Albright, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify my points in light of what Dave mentioned, I agree, Dave. Keep the voluntary measures in there. They're good. They're aspirational, and they're kind of things to work towards. But unless they're quantifiable, as far as I know, Natural England won't accept them, and the plan just won't get any further. And you all know why I've got a reason to kind of want the plan to be in place. But there are two parts to the voluntary sector. You've got the things that have already been done over the last 6 years, many of which are publicly funded. So that data should be collectible, and it should be something that can be put forward into the plan, even if it's just a case of, look what we did try and do. Even, the figures might not stack up to a reduction, but they're going to be compelling because it's going to be huge amounts of public money. It's going to be a lot of work that you've all done in the last 6 years, and it's a chance to say we did all of this, and the mystery of phosphates, prevails. And then there must be some of the voluntary actions that we can quantify. So even if we take it out of, kind of group them into aspirationals and quantifiables, that will still help Natural England close the gap. Because as far as I know, it's not a huge gap anymore. But referring back to what Sarah said, I think it's important that we have a total amount of phosphate kind of figure put into the tag as well. Because if we just keep going on percentages, it won't get us anywhere nearer or incentivize us all to try and reduce that top figure, which we need to do.
Thank you. I think the contribution made by Joanna Ridgewell earlier was very pertinent to this, and that they're looking around what voluntary measures are quantifiable. I think that's going to be absolutely critical. I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcomes from that. Simon Evans, you've got your hand up.
Just in answer to Chris, sorry. I've got two sorry. Get up.
Love Zoom.
Two terrier puppies in the kitchen. Sorry. Sorry for that, Ben. In answer. They need a walk. In answer to Chris, favourable conservation status is defined by the SAC, by the Special Area of Conservation, which lists a number of species of particular conservation concern, and favourable conservation status is defined by whether they are in healthy populations. So if one of them is in an unhealthy population, the conservation status is either unfavourable declining, unfavourable improving, or etc., or good. That was the principal point that I wanted to bring in.
Thank you. So just returning to the plan.
Can I just return and say that's the reason that I picked up the word in favourable condition status, because it should be favourable conservation status, as Simon noted. But the report doesn't say that at the moment. It says favourable condition status. So
thank you. That's very helpful, and hopefully that's been picked up by the TAG members, Jenny particularly.
Can I come in, Joanna Ridgewell?
Yes, Joanna.
Hello. Sorry, just can't find that prompt about the hand. Yes, I mean, I think I've seen the plan relatively fresh, having as I'm standing in on the board, and I think really good progress has been made, and there are some activities that can be measured coming underway, and we also are getting a better understanding of what that gap is. But I would agree that there's definitely more work to be done. And I think that the points being made around the FCS, etc. I think the point is that that isn't in the plan at the moment, and it needs to be to give that whole picture. And that I think somebody else said as well that it needs ordering out so you can see what's certain, what isn't. And then we can see at a glance whether it's going to do the job that it needs to.
Yeah. Thank you. Jenny Gamble, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention at the last board meeting, there was a paper produced that was circulated to everybody called Catchment Maps and Apportionment with Reasonable Worst Case Phosphate Predictions. And that has got, that is where the pie charts came from. But at the beginning of that document, there is some information on the actual load that's required to be removed. So it has got some figures in there on how much, almost like what is the gap. So I think it's come out at 5.5% of the current input from agriculture. If 5% is taken out, then those, those levels would be met. So people might want to have another look at that because there's quite a lot of information in that.
Thank you. Sorry, my computer keeps binging. I do apologise. Anyone else who wants to come in at this point? Andrew?
Hi, hello, Chair. Yeah, it's just really picking up from what Jenny and also Simon and Mary have been saying there about the effectiveness of some of the measures, because of course there is an awful lot of overlap with this work, with the work that we're doing in the catchment, with our natural flood management work as well that Beth Lewis is also involved with, and we're looking at measuring and quantifying the sort of benefits of that work as well, not just locally in Herefordshire but nationally, which will also hopefully feed into this as well to give us that sort of confidence around some of these measures. I think the other thing I was going to say around the sort of regulatory side of things, of course, things have moved on a little bit with the changes with the and the powers we have now under the farming rules for water. So it is very much about limiting phosphates onto the land and not going above what the crop requirements are for that. So a lot of our work will be focusing just on that, and obviously building up a bigger picture of what those phosphate levels look like across the catchment. So I think that's something that's going to be very important moving forward, which is also in our plan as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the 2018 rules are really good. You've got a tool, something to use there. So I think probably the next question is, what would stop you using them? I've got a question over the again the sort of paragraph dealing with diffuse, primarily reliant on voluntary uptake. Extreme cases will be dealt with by enforcement notice powers where appropriate. Why extreme cases, and how extreme is extreme? I don't know. It just seems like on the one hand, there's just like a tremendous reluctance to actually use the water rules farming to make a change. In other words, where voluntary measures are not working, why does it have to be extreme? I don't understand. Dave?
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Well, then maybe that shouldn't be in the plan.
No, clearly it's a case by case basis. But yeah, I would agree with that. There is no need for the word extreme there.
Yeah, because there are bits in the plan which sort of seem to me to be stepping back, as it were, where we need to be stepping forwards, and that would be one of those things. Along with right at the start of the plan, where it says the principle of the polluter pays, but not really. Why do we need to even say that? This is not an absolute requirement, and variation from it may sometimes be necessary. Why are we bargaining this? It's ridiculous. Sorry,
Chair, could I come in? It's Mark.
Yes,
Mark William again. So just the conversation, I suppose, with Dave, how we would word that, I suppose, would be in accordance with our enforcement policy. No doubt you have one nationally, don't you, for the Environment Agency, which would look at the public interest test, wouldn't it, and look at the evidence test. And that I would have thought would be the appropriate comment there rather than extreme.
Absolutely, Mark. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Could I also just comment while I, you know, I obviously wish to congratulate, you know, the TAG group in getting the plan together. I think for my part, I think I mentioned it at the TAG group, it would be lovely to have with every single action, and I know it's kind of been intimated, the actual reduction in phosphate and the milestone year that would happen. And somehow if that was totaled up at the end of it, we would know for which years, you know, that amount of phosphate could be taken out. And I get totally that a lot of these things are still embryonic and it wouldn't be known, but then it would be a live document. And that's where I think for a scientific-based, evidence-based action plan, I think officers from this council anyway would like to see it gets, and we'd be happy to put those sort of levels in for the actions which Herefordshire Council are proposing. I think one or two other organisations also have suggested that might be appropriate. I would be welcome views of others though.
I think, yeah, I mean, so I was trying to get to a more, and I acknowledge, I completely understand, acknowledge that it's very difficult and challenging when you're talking about, as it were, soft measures. I get that. But where we can get to a quantifiable impact or output or result of some description, I would like to know that that's going to be recorded as a kind of, you know, red, amber, green, or whatever, that we have some way of monitoring and tracking that progress. And if that can be given a quantifiable P reduction, so much the better. And if it can't, then it can't, and that's the explanation, and that's fair enough. But there is also a sense of timeline to this, because actually 2027 is not that far away. And with that in mind, the mention of the water protection zone that comes right at the end of the diffuse, short paragraph on diffuse, if the voluntary measures do not deliver the reductions required by agriculture, it may be necessary to seek formal restrictive measures. It doesn't give me any idea of the timeline. So at what point do we say this hasn't worked, given that we're now 6 years into the plan, as it were, and we've got roughly the same amount still to go? At what point do we say, well, voluntary measures, frankly, it's not working, we need to try something different? And I think a timeline, or a sense of a timeline over that, would be helpful, since a water protection zone is not something that can happen overnight, and that perhaps actually we would need to start the processes a lot sooner than that, because actually they'll take a while to kind of, you know, get ahead of steam up, really. There's just a slight change that you'll need to make on the oversight and engagement section, which is, I'm not a cabinet member. I think that's a leftover from the previous iteration of the plan. So it says it's, that the chair is held by a cabinet member. I'm not. And also we have a new member, so that change could incorporate that. Dave Throop, you've got your hand up. Is that from before, or?
Sorry, Chair, I haven't learned to take it down yet. I will try.
You just took it down, then you put it there. It's off now, Dave.
Okay, so I think the only thing I was going to just say that there's a question over language, particularly around the EA work, about farmers need to make an assessment of their nutrient need with specific focus on limiting application of phosphates under diffuse. And I'm not certain, given the conversation we're having over voluntary measures versus a regulatory floor, what the word need means in this context. Does it mean should, or does it mean has to?
It is a requirement of the regulations to.
I would make that clearer then, and probably reference the legislative framework for this. Well, don't be ambiguous if you don't need to be ambiguous, because it just confuses everyone. So, you know, really,
absolutely.
You know, if they have to, they have to. So
I think the words shall and must are appropriate.
And you know, and refer to the, you know, where you get that authority from. You know, I think it just helps everyone to have clarity where possible in what is a complex area. Helen Dale, CLA, with a blue hand.
Yeah, I suppose this conversation made me realise that I think I asked this a while ago, but I'm still not quite clear. I know there's a monitoring dashboard, but it's not very easy to pick out since the start of the plan, what's happened, what's been delivered, what are the voluntary measures that have occurred. And I'm not clear for us to be able to say the voluntary measures. I'm not sure we're there because I'm not sure we know those voluntary measures are. And I think the dashboard is great, but I really struggle to get that information from it.
Thank you. I agree. So is there any way that we can strengthen the evidence base around the voluntary measures that have been undertaken over the past 6 years? So we must know, those people who've been delivering those measures must know what they've done and what the outcome has been, and if there's some way of getting a sense, because actually I think that will help us all enormously. It would bring public confidence to the idea of voluntary measures. It will allow us to praise where praise is due. Is there any way that we can discover that? Who really is delivering the voluntary measures? Simon?
We can. The problem is one of resource. So we can go. We did do this at the end of one of our projects, the Wye Herefordshire Improvement Project, and which finished in 2014, and it was a considerable body of work going back to 500 farmers to audit what has changed and what was going to change. The one thing that we can catch is the mid-tier agreements that we're signing up with Natural England and the farmers. And I have taken an action on myself to go back and catch that.
Thank you. I think any information around this is going to be very helpful. Mr. Morris, Peter Morris, Paris.
Just going to sort of add from my sort of planning experience here, when we're putting planning documents together, you put a monitoring framework at the same time. And I think I've heard targets mentioned as well. And timelines. I'm just wondering whether this is something that we could ask the TAG group to begin to build and look at. So it takes a look back at the online monitoring work that's already been done, and we begin to build some sort of monitoring framework alongside the action plan. That seems to me to be the obvious thing to do. And then if resource, it's interesting what Simon just said then about resources. I can see difficulties certainly in how you measure what contributions each action makes. If there's a resource implication, I guess this group needs to know about that and understand that. And let's then discuss that and see if a solution can be found. Well, I think it's probably something in my mind, that's my suggestion, take it back to the TAG and let's begin to build a monitoring framework.
Thank you. I think that there is there's an increased degree of emphasis on monitoring in this iteration of the plan, which is good to see. But yeah, I think it's, you know, the resource implication of monitoring what your resources have already been spent on. It seems to me to be the smaller part of the equation, given that there's a certain amount of resource goes into the action. Dave Throop.
I think Simon's really covered it, because we went to Simon. Okay. This reflects a conversation that I've had with Simon in terms of trying to get some metrics around the outcomes for what's been put in, because there can't be many catchments in the UK that have had more investment in terms of advice than the Wye and the Lug. You know, there have been millions of pounds put into it. The CSF, there's all the WUF work that's been going on, and there have been, you know, significant improvements in practice on a number of farms. And yet, you know, the inconvenient truth is phosphate levels aren't dropping.
Very succinctly put. Thank you, Mr. Throop. Sarah Faulkner and then Jim Hicks.
I was going to raise the resource issue as well, and it's a shame that Nick Reed's not here, because I know he's done some evaluation through Farm Herefordshire. I think the big difficulty there is that a lot of the Farm Herefordshire messages, because they're voluntary and they don't necessarily fit into one of the previous agri-environment schemes, it's difficult to capture that data about what's been implemented and where. But it's something that I can take to my membership and ask them about how they feel about gathering that kind of data and how that could be done, whether that could be done simply. The difficulty is going to be that we don't have any baseline. So, you know, as Dave says, there's been a lot of investment and an awful lot of positive work that's gone on in the catchment. And yeah, we should be looking at getting a better picture of that going forward.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. I think any information that can add to this sort of to strengthen the certainty of voluntary approaches, I think really, really important and necessary. Jim Hicks.
Sorry, Chair, thanks. Yeah, related to that point, presumably if public money's gone into some of these improvements, these voluntary improvements on farms, isn't there a database somewhere on somebody's computer or in somebody's system which records what that public money has gone on? Couldn't that form the basis of some form of certainty?
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame. Sarah's right. It's a shame that Nick Reed isn't here. I think he'd probably be the right person to be answering that question. But it's a fair question. Helen Stace.
Hello. I think I'd just like to sort of enforce what's just been said. You know, if you look at all the millions of pounds that have been spent in the catchment, we probably could have brought up all the floodplain meadows along the river several times over. And, you know, in terms of actually achieving real results, having the land and taking it out of production and doing something sensible with it, reverting it to floodplain meadow or whatever, has to be a really good option.
Yeah, and it may be that ultimately we're looking at not as well as, but either or, and therefore we will have to take a position on what is the better place, as it were, to invest this money to bring about improvement in the condition of the SAC. Sarah Faulkner, NFU.
I was just going to say about voluntary measures. I mean, the difficulty is that a lot of them aren't funded. They've been funded by farm businesses. So people who are experimenting with cover cropping or looking at soil management and really taking account of the big asks that have come out of Farm Herefordshire, a lot of that won't fit within agri-environment scheme. I mean, Simon might have some data on behavioural practice change through his WWOOF visits, but that is the nub of the problem, is that people are doing this voluntarily. It's not through an existing mechanism, and therefore we can't capture data.
I think if you could speak to your membership and we could try do our best to catch that, because actually I'm very, very concerned that that we're going to get to a position where we're lumping everyone together and it's not fair. And where we have farmers who are cover cropping, who are conscious of the topography, who are being careful with their spreading, and who are changing and adapting the way they farm, you know, that this needs to be known about and acknowledged. And, you know, I think, but we will need to know, get that somehow we need to draw that information out and quantify it. And I think that'd be really, really helpful if you could try to get that sort of information from your membership, Sarah. Simon Evans.
Yeah, we did, as I said, we did quantify this at the end of the Wye Herefordshire Improvement Project. We were looking at diatom analysis, phosphate levels, changing catchment, and particularly soil levels and salmonid fish survival through spawning. And I don't doubt that these measures do work. We just got to catch them. I mean, the measure from the back of the WIP project was that we've now got salmon spawning successfully in the lug system, in the lower lug system, which was something that had basically been eradicated for the best part of a decade. as a result of too much soil. That soil has been arrested as a result of getting into the rivers as a result of voluntary change by farmers. And we measured that, recorded that, and the result was that that aspect of the SAC, i.e. salmon spawning in the lug, is now in favourable condition. The problem we've got is that the ranunculus is now in very unfavourable condition, and that's the driver behind the nutrient issue.
Thank you. Helen Dale, CLA.
I think I just wanted to pick up, and it's following on from what Sarah said and also that you said as well, is I don't want the people observing this meeting to think that all the actions that occurred on the ground are publicly funded. I think, you know, we need to accept that there are those measures that are going on that landowners are funding themselves. It does make it difficult to capture, but I think it's important that we don't go away with the assumption that everything is being publicly funded.
Thank you. Beth Lewis.
Yeah, it was just to add really that so the Natural Flood Management Project that's funded by DEFRA, through that we're capturing the work that's going on, and through all the different farm advice visits, through the Whynos Foundation and Severn Rivers Trust advisors going out, we are capturing the kind of changes that are happening. So the farmers that are doing cover cropping, whether they're doing stuff through mid-tier, whether they're doing it through the grant scheme. So that kind of data is being captured for the 7 catchment areas we are working in, which might be able to feed into some of this.
I think that'd be really helpful. A lot of this information is sort of out there in different places. If we could think where it might be and draw it in, it would be useful, I think. So I'm not going to go through every page of the plan. You will be glad to know. Because a lot of the notes that I have are pretty much repetitive about, you know, trying to quantify things, trying to arrive at a sense of progress, where we were, where we are, where we want to get to. And I think that would be just a sort of a general note. And also I found that when I got to the action plan and there were actions that carried enough detail to make me have confidence as it were, you know, a bystander to the action plan, not on the tag, then that's what I want to see in an action plan. So we're looking at the integrated wetlands. So we're going to do this, it's going to have this result, and that's going to be the benefit. And that's marvelous. Now I know it's quite a sort of, that's one of the more simpler models, and when we're talking about some of these softer issues, it's not simple, but as close as possible in the action plan. I need to have a sense of, we're going to do this, this is going to be the outcome, this is going to be the benefit, and ideally by this time. We have a target and we have a time, and it's a lot tighter and a lot less kind of feeling like we've got absolutely forever to get this sorted, because we don't. And also I think when the rural SUDs, which I'm quite a fan of, I think there's some partnership working that's nascent but would be very useful with the Lug Internal Drainage Board and their ratepayers. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm going to completely take on board the comments of Chris O'Brien and you know, understand if he's not comfortable with the idea of this being, as it were, iterative live documents that we are simply going to approve today with provisos. I understand that. I would like, if possible, to have some ongoing oversight with the rewrite so that we don't kind of keep going round and round endlessly. That would be excellent. And perhaps this will come back through the tag, reflecting the debate today. And I think we have all arrived at a point where we're saying, well, we want to see a stronger evidence base for voluntary measures. We want to see a clearer determination in the language and the application of regulatory flaw over this. If we can get more information from the CLA NFU membership as to what they're doing and in some way quantify and capture that, it would be really, really helpful. We need a timeline and a narrative around the pie chart. Can't just plonk that in, it's too incendiary. So is that okay? I mean, I think, you know, hopefully that all the debate has been captured. And so what I would suggest to the board is that we accept this iteration of the plan with the proviso that it will come back to the next board meeting with amendments to reflect the debate, because there are shifts in emphasis, not in the major portion of the document. Has anyone got any comments on that as a proposal? Right, okay. Well, I'll do a name check if that's okay for voting board members, and if you could just signify whether you're for or against that as a suggestion.
So, Councillor, sorry, it's Mark William. So would it be just useful just before we go through that, just to exactly clarify the wording of what it is we are suggesting? We are accepting the plan as is, but we're also saying that there will be some corrections or some alterations
with a proviso, yeah.
With that proviso, and
that broadly that's reflected to reflect this debate.
Yeah.
Strengthening the measures around diffuse, bringing some, wherever possible, as much quantitative evidential base around the benefits of the voluntary measures as possible, to strengthen the sort of the timeline narrative, targets, outcomes, phosphate reduction in the action plan, to bring a narrative around the pie chart, to explain what was, what is, and what will be, the known knowns, as it were, which hopefully will allow us to see the gap. And we'll reveal that.
Good. I think there was an undertaking as well for the National Parks Authority to review the document as well from their perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can feed in as we go, and that would be perfectly acceptable. I think, really.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just wanted just to clarify that so that we know what we're voting for.
I think that's kind of, without getting into the minutiae. There are some minutiae, but I don't think that would form part of this. Like the fact I'm not a cabinet member, only saying.
You have been in the past, though.
Past glories. So yeah, are we good with that? So I'll take a quick name vote if that's all right. Mark Willimont, you for or against?
For.
Thank you. James Evans not here. Peter Morris.
For. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hume as substituting then for Councillor Evans.
For.
Thank you. Mark Roshanowski.
I'll be for.
Thank you. Simon Evans.
For.
Sarah Faulkner. Helen Dale.
For.
Dave Throop.
For.
David Lee.
For.
Joanna Redgewell. Joanna, you're on mute.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, sorry, for. I just wanted to add that obviously I only had this plan a couple of days, and given its importance, I do need to consult more widely to check on that action road that you come forward with, which sounds fine to me, but I'm just going to ask if it's sensible to do that on this plan now and get those comments in for the type to consider as we go forward, rather than waste time later on.
I think, yeah, I mean, it might be, in a sense, the work that you're doing concurrently, I think will probably feed into this anyway, to the next board meeting. And that, so it could all work beautifully.
Okay.
We can only hope. Mary Albright.
Like Joanna, I'm for, but with the proviso that I can read the document fully because I've only had it a day or so. And also I would like to ask if we can put on the table a semi-proposal that we look at the housing delivery figures, because they only came out a couple of weeks ago and they are going to be significantly less over the past 6 years than the plan might have anticipated. And that in itself is a quantifiable reduction of phosphate.
Thank you. Helen Stace.
For.
And Christopher O'Brien.
I'm going to abstain, but thank you.
That's fine, thank you. Yeah, so can we make a note that board members get a longer sight of this as it is revised? I think that would be a good thing. Thank you. So now we move on to updates, and we'll start with the WIASC Foundation update.
Yeah, trying to manage two terriers that I know are going to kick off at any moment, but I'll go through this quite quickly. We've still got 8.5 farm advisors working in England and 1.5 working in Wales. They are working on farms targeting issues around phosphate loss and soil loss to water, putting in place reduction measures and funding those reduction measures. And this is why it should be able to be caught through agreements with Natural England and through mid-tier. It was £3.2 million was invested last year on cover crops, widening rotations, fencing of livestock, putting in buffer strips, sorting out infrastructure, etc. And £5.7 million has gone out this year through this agreement. So this isn't so much change in terms of attitude change. These are actual physical changes on the ground, and that's why I've taken an action on myself to catch all this and put it into a phosphate language for inclusion in the plan going forward. In Wales, the WISE project, which unfortunately doesn't have the same delivery aspect, is working with farmers in the IPEN system. But what that is doing is it's giving us good engagement with those farmers, and we're identifying opportunities for natural capital markets, which will in time reduce the phosphate loading coming out of that catchment. And we made, or Gail, who's also on this call, have made some very good progress this morning on a tree planting initiative coming out of America. Through the Court Hold 2025 work, we continue to work with farmers and their buyers to improve practice and crucially to fund change so that the farmers are better off as a result of the changes that they undertake. And we've just about completed the use of the mechanisms that we put in place to recycle the coir from the soft fruit to use it as soil conditioning agents in arable, to build up organic matter in arable soils, which will help to sequester phosphate. And again, there should be a metric there that can be caught, which I will try and do. Sorry.
Yeah, should I use this as an opportunity? We could actually let the public in now to listen, because I think we've finished our debating. Would that be useful?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah, so we can let them in. Okay. So as I let them in, you just might want to just say that they were just listening. Good. Okay, someone else is doing that for me. Perfect.
All right. Marvellous.
They've been in the waiting room long enough.
We're working with 32 farmers, 32 dairy farmers in Monmouthshire, who are Muller suppliers, to try and reduce the improve farm infrastructure and reduce loading of soil and phosphate. There is the Arla deal that's happening in North Herefordshire that's making great tractions in the Arrow system. You look at what those farmers are doing now, and that's just got to have a lasting effect. Adam Bowley, for example, who's just put in planning to bring in 500 cows that were overwintering in fields into housing, will just have the amount of phosphate that will save is considerable, and just needs to be caught. And we're also working with the poultry sector, particularly in the Eithne catchment, and their suppliers, to find ways that they can farm in a way that doesn't lose so much phosphate that they get a premium in terms of eggs, and we can get in wetlands downstream of the range areas to try and catch phosphate that's leaking from the units. The other thing that we're doing, which is sort of taking up most of my time at the moment, is the integrated wetlands. And I think I've updated the group on them most of the time, but we are now, we've just got the form and a revised map, which are to do, and then we'll be able to supply, submit planning. So I was hoping I would have it done before this meeting, but Mark, I will email you as soon as it goes in.
Thanks, Simon. Do we have a sense of the phosphate credits trading, that side of things from the wetlands? We're trying to work that out.
This is subject to approval from Natural England. So Gail has drafted a HRA. Well, the Gail has shadowed a HRA, which the council, I think, are submitting to Natural England, which will set the phosphate trading scheme running, and then this will apportion with certainty a certain amount of phosphate that's coming from the wetlands, and then that divided by the cost will create the credits.
Okay.
Thank you. The one other thing I didn't mention is that we have, thanks to Oz, and I would like to give him a shout out here, it looks like we're going to get a second sonde in the catchment. One sonde is now installed and collecting data in the Eithne system, and there's going to be a new sonde coming in to work in the Froome system, which was one of the agreements of this board in a previous meeting, so that we can start to understand why we have a river that's the Lug system that's passing upstream of the junction with the Froome is failing just downstream of the junction with the Froome.
Thank you. Herefordshire Council.
Thank you, Chair. I'll probably pick this up for colleagues, but it might be useful if anyone comes in to correct me if I've got anything wrong. So on the 10th of August this year, we had a cabinet member report signed off, which essentially gave us the governance to go out and use up to £2 million of New Homes bonus money to spend on either integrated wetlands or on reversion, repurposing, rewilding, whatever you wish to call it. The purpose being of both to offset phosphate impact upon the SAC and to essentially assist in lifting the moratorium on housing development in the Lug catchment. So I'm pleased to confirm that officers have already been out on the district, and we're at the point of just about making our first offer for land. There's been quite positivity when we've been out and seeing the farmers. They seem to want to do business with us, so to speak, and they also see the usefulness in what we're trying to do. So that seems very promising, and that's something which clearly is going to have quite an impact. So like Simon's saying, for Why and Ask Foundation, they're hoping to put 2 forward. We're looking to put up to 8 forward. So that's going to have, we hope, a significant impact. And obviously we're working with Natural England and the Environment Agency in those discussions, and also discussed with Welsh Water, because they would be adjacent to sewage treatment works without phosphate stripping. So that's all very exciting. That's all happening now. Just to add to that, we've also, since our last meeting, been successful with a bid made through the Marches Local Enterprise Partnership through an MHCLG grant, and we've been awarded a further £1 million to put towards that project. There is, however, a proviso that we have to spend 60% in this financial year, so we have to spend up to £600,000 by the 31st of March, so that's going to be quite interesting. But if we move ahead with land purchase or options, then hopefully that is something that we can deliver on. So essentially that gives us £3 million, which I think we'd all agree is something that's quite very, very useful anyway for this forum. The other work that's ongoing is the interim plan. The scoping for that has been agreed, and that's all gone out, and that's currently being tendered for. Just to remind those board members and any new ones, the interim plan is a plan which is pretty much going to be emulating what we've seen that has been successfully implemented elsewhere, like in Hampshire, the Solent work, and that would be giving us the latest update on where we actually sit in relation to phosphates in the Lug catchment, including the apportionment, which we've discussed. And we also want it to include what we call a phosphates calculator that can be used by anybody, whether a housing developer or the Environment Agency or another local authority or whatever, to work out the impact of phosphate on whatever measure is being proposed. That's happened elsewhere, and that's really been a useful tool. In the background also, there's a memorandum of understanding, which I believe is in the final sign-off throes, but if I'm incorrect on that, I know Liz Dibberley's probably got her handle on that better than I. And just to mention that there are other forums that are going on which Herefordshire Council's putting together. One is we meet regularly with Powys Council, so Peter and Councillor, is it Julian Davis, is it? I couldn't quite see the surname, but I think we've got a meeting on the 16th of October, so that's something which we do, I think, bi-monthly, and I know that we'll be inviting national parks. In fact, I've already forwarded that invite to you, Chris. And also we've been liaising with other bodies, including Herefordshire Construction Industry Lobby Group, and a meeting with our local South Herefordshire MP, Jessie Norman, but I won't steal the thunder from Mary Albright, who no doubt might want to update on that. But those are the sort of things that Herefordshire Council's been doing in the interim. If there's anything I missed, we've got other officers that perhaps can come in and assist.
No, I think you've just about covered it, Mark. The only thing I would add is that, yeah, the tenders are in for the interim delivery plan, and they're being reviewed, and the MOU, we're just drawing up the final draft.
Great, that's what I'd hoped.
Brilliant.
Good. It changes daily. Thank you, Chair.
No, that's great progress. Thanks very much. I have a couple of hands up. Simon Evans.
Thank you, Mark. But this is actually more a question for the chair. I'm aware that Gail has prepared a presentation on trading platforms, and I wasn't sure where it was in the agenda, because it was in the first draft of the agenda, but it wasn't in this agenda, and whether it should have been with my update.
Probably yes, but if we get a clip on through the updates, we'll pop it in at the end if that's agreeable.
I'm in regular contact with Mark, so I haven't got any further questions for him.
Okay. Helen Dale.
I wondered if I could just ask for some clarity around the interim plan. And it's where somebody's put in a planning application and they've worked with consultants to evidence nutrient neutrality. Are those planning applications also on hold awaiting the interim plan, or are those planning applications ones that are able to work their way through the system?
Okay, I might ask a planner to come in and help me with this one. So the applications which are currently in the moratorium are the ones that haven't yet been determined. Obviously, if they'd been approved before the moratorium, they would be in process. The interim plan isn't the mechanism that's going to necessarily release that. It's just informing us exactly the condition of the lug, apportionment, and the calculator for it. So it will give a tool to housing developers and potentially farmers as well about what they can do to move their developments forward. It would be the habitat risk assessment and appropriate assessment under that, which would actually allow a development to go forward. And for that, no doubt Natural England would be looking for us through our HRA habitat risk assessment to show that there's neutrality or betterment in every application that's being considered. So that could be, and as Simon's alluded to, it could be we set up a trading platform for phosphate credits, which is likely, and it's what's been done elsewhere, and that developers would have to acquire those credits, purchase those credits to go forward, which would offset some of the costs. That's why I see that. I don't know if anybody else has got better explanation. Does that help?
It helps with the explanation, yes, and I understand the interim plan, but I have had a query from a member that says that they have put a planning application in, that they have worked with consultants to demonstrate a neutral impact of phosphates, but they feel that it's got blocked. So that's why I've assumed that it's waiting for the interim plan. From what you're saying, that shouldn't be the case. So that
no, they wouldn't. It wouldn't be blocked. I mean, there is also, sorry to cut over, but there is a phosphate calculator already, which has been used elsewhere in the UK called the Stodmarsh one. We'd be happy for that to be used to support that, or for a reputable consultant expert to specify in the supporting evidence with the application why it is he or she feels that the application's got betterment or neutrality. So that's how that would be looked at by the planning officers, and the ecologists that work for us would be undertaking the appropriate assessment, and would be looking to see how that all balances out. So you don't have to wait for the interim plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. Paris County Council.
If I may, Chair, I'll come in. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I just refer to my list, sorry. I think we last time we met, we were receiving a lot of media attention. We're still receiving a lot of media attention, it'd be fair to say, largely relating to poultry units still. Our Cabinet member, Councillor James Evans, was on BBC Wales News for about 3 weeks ago. So there's been quite a large petition that's been prepared asking us to place a moratorium on poultry units. So I've had to do quite a lot of management around that. I have had some conversations with Welsh Government on that subject, really around their guidance that they are planning or have been working on. It's been stalled because of COVID. I'm being told that they will pick that piece of work up again. So that's technical advice note for intensive livestock units. There's also Welsh Government, I mentioned it last time, Welsh Government regulations out there around fertilisers, agricultural pollution. That's still, they're sat on Welsh Government's website, have not been implemented yet. There's a message on the website saying that will be reviewed in time. So that's still sat there. Just a general one at a Welsh level, maybe just of interest. The Senedd now is sitting considering a national development framework for Wales. So that will be an all Wales development plan. So there will be people in this meeting who may have an interest in that. It's obviously being scrutinised by members of the Senedd now, and there may be opportunity to try and influence that as well. So I just mentioned that in passing. Okay, that's my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Right, Environment Agency.
Thank you, Chair. Two things to update you on. I'll keep it as brief as I can. Monitoring and regulation. So monitoring, there was a paper that I think was attached to the meeting details, which is an interim update really, when not the end of the journey. The way things work in the agency is we need to submit any local monitoring plan up to national, so it's included within our overall national plan. So we have done that. The proposed plan that we've got includes the statutory monitoring for SAC compliance. There it is. You can see it on the map there. We've taken advice of colleagues, and particularly Natural England. You'll recall there were some issues in terms of frequency of monitoring, and I think some of the determinants that we were monitoring against, we've taken those into account, and that will give us a better long-term baseline to the frequency of monitoring. They'll all be at least monthly frequency, whereas before that wasn't necessarily the case. So that's the kind of statutory network monitoring, but we've also discussed previously about a programme of more agile monitoring, which will allow us to hopefully move around within the sub-catchments using the intelligence and the existing data we've got to do much more detailed drills into where phosphate is particularly coming from specific locations, so that we can then target both our regulatory work and work of partners hopefully more efficiently. So we've got a plan of action there for that. We've had a look at all the data that we've got for the Lug catchment, and we've identified 3 water bodies, three areas where it looks like phosphate is high and rising, and that's the other map, one of the other maps that's on there in funny pink and blue colours. But really, we're picking up the bottom end of the Froome in particular, and parts of the Arrow, where it seems that something is amiss in terms of levels. So we're going to deploy this sort of more agile monitoring in those areas to start with. That'll involve much more mobile stuff, so field phosphate monitoring, field invert samples, plant sampling, that kind of stuff. And we're also going to look at the possibility of using some auto-sampling sondes, which will allow us to take regular samples, particularly linked to high rainfall events, so we can get a better understanding of the stuff that's going on there. The next steps will be to tie this in with what other partners are doing. Simon's just mentioned, the fact that there are other forms of monitoring out there. Our partners are doing lots of other stuff. We need to join up with that, and that's certainly the intention. There's also interest from community groups coming forward doing citizen science type monitoring as well. We will try to integrate all of that as far as we can with this more dynamic monitoring approach. And finally, the piece that hasn't progressed as fast as probably would have liked, but in terms of the discussions with NRW and the cross-border working, we are just starting to pick those up now. We've got a couple of areas of interest, in particular where the Y comes across the English border at Witney, also down at Redbrook, and also the upper reaches of the Lug, which we are going to explore with NRW in terms of future monitoring, joined up monitoring, and I will update at the next meeting. In terms of regulation, our regulatory approach, we've completely updated all the satellite imagery and the slope and soil overlays that we've used in previous years. This is the 3rd or the 4th year of soil patrol that we've done. We are upping the resource this year. We've allocated additional resource to the Y and Lug. It's been accepted as a priority area for West Midlands Environment Agency overall. So we will be putting additional staff resource in, and also allocating more of our detailed farm audits to the Herefordshire Y and Lug. That's where we go in and do a very detailed analysis of what's going on particular farms. So we will be doing some more of those. They will be targeted particularly at locations where we've had previous issues with compliance. So they will be targeted farm audits as well. You'll probably be aware we've issued 1,200 letters to farmers, every farmer in the Lug catchment over a certain size, basically reminding them of their responsibilities under the Farming Rules for Water, and asking for their help in terms of supporting our aim to improve the river. Last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of boots on the ground, prepping the work, having a look at high-risk locations that we've identified through satellite and also through public reports, that kind of stuff. We've done over 100 visits so far, and we've identified quite a lot of potential breaches of Farming Rules for Water. And also a number of locations where we want to do these more detailed farm audits. Moving forwards, wet weather starting this weekend, so clearly things will be on the move. We've got a number of locations that we intend to target and visit where we've had previous issues with runoff. We will be visiting those first to see if there has been any improvement after advice has been offered. And also, I think, as Andrew mentioned earlier, we will be having a particular focus on phosphate records, soil records, which are required under Farming Rules for Water, and we'll be requiring targeted farmers to provide us with some of those records as well, with the idea that over time we should be able to build a proper map of actual phosphate levels in the soil, which again will help us with our targeting. That's it, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I have a question. The soil patrol, and I'm really happy to hear that there's more resource, more boots on the ground going to be in the area. That's fantastic. But how many officers are we talking about? And given that the moment where the problem will be most apparent is likely to coincide with the same moment that you will be dealing with flooding incidents, would you still have enough boots on the ground? And very intrigued by the citizen science idea, and that maybe actually that would be a very good moment for that additional resource to be able to step forward and help photograph, record, whatever, find evidence of soil loss, soil erosion, and so on and so forth.
Taking them one at a time. In terms of resource, we've currently got about 6 to 8 officers who are basically based in that team. We will draw on up to probably 10 to 12 on particular operations. So that's a reasonably significant number. We've had double-figure numbers out over the last few days and covered a lot of ground there. So with the additional resource being brought in, it won't be there all the time. We will bring it in and scale it back as we do individual operations. In terms of the flooding, yes, we have thought of that, and we are trying to protect a number of those warranted officers who are agriculture trained, and in order to be able to keep them back, that would only apply on what I would call routine flooding. If we get a February of this year, it is literally all hands to the pump, and preservation of life does trump this. But we are taking steps to try to preserve that trained resource that we've got, because you're right, it does overlap. The citizen science is really early stages. I won't pretend it isn't, but I do know that there are a number of already active groups and groups that want to become more involved with a lot of the publicity that's happening, and it's really important we try wherever possible to join them up with the actual, what I would call the formal monitoring that is going on, because there's absolutely no reason why it can't be done. It may not be able to be done to British standard, whatever it is, but to be honest, that doesn't necessarily matter.
Just on that as well, we've got with the citizen science side of things, we've got a lot of the partners engaged through the NFM work, linking with obviously that Beth is leading on for Herefordshire. So landowners, farm owners, very keen to engage with that work as well, reporting on the effectiveness of those measures that we'll be putting in place to limit sort of soil erosion and runoff in the catchments as well. So that's a really good, some of that data and that evidence will be really, really handy for this as well.
Thank you. I have a couple of hands up. Simon Evans.
Hi, Dave. Is this time limited? I ask because there are a couple of issues last year that I know you were following up, and I wondered that they then got lost in the flooding, and I wondered if they were still being followed up or if they had gone over a time limit.
I don't know the ones you're talking about, but no, this doesn't have a time limit on it. Clearly, the officers that are doing this will be dealing with other land and water issues. So, if we go into drought or if we go into severe flood, then things may change. But we have a long-term commitment to agri-diffuse in the Wye and Lug catchment.
The one I'm particularly talking about was the one that was referred to by several farmers as the sword of Damocles.
I know where you are, and it's still on the list.
And Helen Stace.
Well, it's really great to hear about all these boots on the ground and all this the work, but this is essentially monitoring, not actually regulation. So I'd like to know, what sanctions you're intending to apply to the persistent offenders, please.
No, the resource I'm talking about isn't monitoring. The monitoring is on top of that. The resource I was just talking about in terms of the 10 to 12 are regulatory officers, and they are out essentially enforcing farming rules for water. So if I have a look at my live dashboard now, we've got 22 potential breaches, 27 advice and guidance letters, 6 formal farm inspections required. So yes, we will be enforcing farming rules for water.
Good, glad to hear it.
Thank you. I've got a member of the public with his hand up. If the members of the public could just hold their questions until the public question time, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. Right, Sue, Natural England update.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Joanna, yes.
Yeah, right, okay. So others have already mentioned the scientific advice we've been providing to the relation to the wetlands and the HRA and planning process, input to interim plan, and also to the monitoring proposals. We've got ongoing dialogue as well with the council ecologists. I believe there's a meeting next week looking at how we can improve the processes between us and the council in responding to applications to make what we can get through a bit clearer, and to clarify the information we need to see and how it's presented, as there is still room for improvement there. And then the other main bit of work we've talked about quite a lot already today, around having a look at the voluntary mechanisms of CSF, how we can provide more certainty there, and certainly a lot of what I'll be feeding back all the stuff we've been talking about and making sure that we provide our input to that. And then the other main bit is around the work going on nationally. So we continue to learn about the Dutch nitrogen judgment from other parts of the country, improving the consistency across the different parts of the country, and that learning is being brought back into Herefordshire as well. And I think that's fairly short. I think that's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much. Natural Resources Wales. I did notice that we had Anne Weedy is appeared.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit late joining.
That's
Hi. Hi. Yeah, so just picking up on what Peter Morris was saying, really, the River Wye in Wales is still attracting quite a lot of attention from local community groups, from the media, from politicians, and it's, I think it's fair to say that it's now a sort of a high priority on our exec team and board's agenda as well. So that's actually, quite good for me and quite good for NRW and quite good for Wales probably too. So I think last time we spoke, we were sort of explaining about this sort of detailed kind of data review that we were commissioning just to try and understand what was going on. So I'm going to cough. Gosh. So that work is ongoing, and David Lee will give you some of the headlines from that data review in a second. But I think, you know, it's important to say we've actually now appointed a project manager to oversee some of this work, because it is escalating, you know, and I think we've got a big piece of work to do around this evidence piece, which is what the data and the information is telling us. Then we'll need to translate that evidence into a sort of form of policy that will inform our plans and our comms that come out of that plans. So that the comms that will come out of those plans. So I think, you know, to actually have somebody overseeing all of that work is quite cross-cutting as far as all the different kind of sort of departments within our organisation go. So that's a really positive piece of news, you know, for us in MLW, just to have somebody in that role overseeing it. So the main kind of update that I want to bring before I bring David Lee in is really around the work that we've been doing, reviewing our habitats targets. So it's a review of the phosphate against the SAC targets on the Welsh rivers, including the Wye. Now that work is still ongoing. There's some final QA to be done before it's signed off. But there are some really sort of clear emerging headlines, which we just thought it was just sort of fair to sort of bring to this group today because of the interest, obviously, in SAC targets that this group has. So, you know, the overarching kind of emerging picture really is that we are likely to be seeing quite widespread failures against the P targets on the Welsh SAC rivers. So like I say, that's a caveated statement. We haven't finished that work. We haven't concluded it. There is still, you know, it still needs to be signed off. But many of our SAC rivers in Wales, including the Wye, but not just the Wye, I think that's an important point to make as well, will be failing to meet those SAC targets for phosphate. Just to set a bit of context around that, we imposed some much tighter limits or targets for phosphate in 2016. So typically before 2016, when our rivers went failing, the targets for phosphate were around 50 micrograms per litre. In 2016, we brought those down to between 20 and 30 micrograms per litre. So it was a significant, between 10 and 20, I should say. So it was a significant tightening of that target for P, and a very ambitious target, but a target that we thought was necessary because it drives investment and it drives improvements. So in 2016, we set these much tighter targets. This is the first time we've actually reviewed against those targets, and it is looking like we are probably going to see some widespread failures. So when we finally sign this work off, this is going to inform our policy. And clearly, you know, we have a sort of a legislative duty as well under the habitats regulations. And what we are likely to see, if it is established that P targets on the Wye and indeed any other Welsh rivers are failing, then NRW will in all likelihood be advising that any new developments with the potential to generate additional P loading in those catchments will need to demonstrate that they can achieve either nutrient neutrality or betterment before those developments can be approved. So it's much really about bringing alignment really with what's currently going on in Herefordshire on the Lug, in Shropshire on the Clun, and across other English local authorities as well. So that's really the kind of sort of significant kind of sort of piece of news that I kind of wanted to bring to this group today. Obviously, we are talking, you know, probably weeks rather than months before we sort of sign this off and develop that policy. We've got conversations to have with Welsh Government. We've got conversations to have with the local planning authorities. And of course, it's also going to inform our own internal permitting processes when people apply for environmental permits that involve the release of any phosphates into those catchments. So that's a significant sort of piece of information. Just focusing in on the Lug, because obviously the Lug is kind of sort of front and centre to a lot of the conversations that we're having on this group. So in Wales, the Lug is not designated as a SAC. It's an SSSI river in Wales, but not a SAC. So that's SAC, so we don't review against any of the SAC targets on the Welsh part of the Lug. So we classify the Lug under WFD in Wales, and the majority of the lug is performing to either high or good status under WFD, apart from the Norton Brook, which we've spoken about before, due to that effluent coming from the Norton sewage treatment works, which is part of a planned improvement under the AMP7 scheme. But because obviously the lug is draining into an English SAC, which is already failing, and I think this was a question that I was asked at the last Nutrient Management Plan board meeting about treating the SACs, treating the rivers as a catchment as a whole, rather than, you know, sort of separating them by a geographical border. So I think in that policy work that we now need to start doing, in light of the failures that we're seeing in Wales, we need to also consider any additional P-loading in those upper reaches of the lug, which are draining into that already failing catchment over in England. So I think I was specifically asked that question last time, so I just wanted to bring that to the table today. So that's really all I had to say. So David Lee was going to bring you a bit of an update. I think there was some of the emerging headlines from the other sort of data review work and some of the work that he and his team is involved with in the Upper Y. So is it okay if it's okay if I can hand over to David Lee?
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, so we've been doing sort of two elements to our trend analysis. And we've looked at sort of specific phosphate data from about 2008 onwards on all the sample points on the Y in Wales. And then we've taken a sort of a longer term view using 7 sample points on the Y and also 1 on the lug, where we've got over 30 years of sort of data. Now, you've got to sort of be mindful that a lot of our data is sort of not generally used for trend analysis. So there's things that we can pick out of it. But as Anne has possibly mentioned, we've also had sort of these very low limits, of phosphate that we have to sort of comply with within the SAC target, sort of stretch the limit of detection of much of our analysis. So there's lots of data that's sort of at the limit of detection, which in itself is a good thing because it suggests that there's no issues. So our monitoring program generally is designed to work alongside fishing and invertebrate programs as a sort of watching brief of issues. And the trend analysis that we've done, we've used external consultants to feed into the approach throughout the process. So the trend analysis is as robust as we can make it. And we've conducted a sort of simple linear trend analysis. And it's a sort of using a standard tool that these consultants recommended, and is sort of a industry standard. So the sort of headlines, when you look at the sort of 7 analysis, sort of long-term sample points, particularly the one where we're interested in, which is the River Lug at Rosses Bridge, which is in Prestine. We've got 34 years of available data there, and so that sample point represents the lug before it enters England. So it's probably the downstream point in Wales before it goes into England, and it's downstream of Prestine sewage works where there has been investment. When you take the 7 sites with the sort of the long-term data, we see a decreasing trend for phosphate with data prior to the late 90s, when higher phosphate concentrations were much more prevalent. So what we're seeing is a decline from that level in the 90s, but more comparatively more stable concentrations in phosphate since. We're not seeing upward trends, but we've not been seeing sort of decreasing trends in the years since the late 1990s, and that may fit with investment programs, particularly from Welsh Water. So what we're suggesting is that later nutrient removal under Habitats Directive may not have had a measured impact on results at the samples and at the sites analysed. So if you consider that nutrient removal at Bromyard, Kington, Morton sewage works, and a tightening of the consent at Leominster sewage works on the why we're targeted at making improvements to the River Lug part of the SAC. So no, we don't see those sorts of improvements in Wales. Those improvements are further down. So say there's a decreasing trend for all 7 sites. 6 of those are on the Wye, and 1 of them is the Lug at the downstream sort of point of in Wales, showing that decreasing trend. So what we've been doing is we've been sort of looking at, particularly I think in the Lug in particular, we've been inspecting chicken farms since late August. We've got 18 farms that operate, and 8 of those hold a permit that's issued by NRW, and those 8 permitted units are broiler units which rear birds indoors on a sort of typical 35 to 42 day cycle on litter which is removed at the end of the cycle. Alongside that, there's 10 smaller free-range egg farms in the catchment, and those are below that threshold, as we would call them, and they will operate using, probably the birds are in for a year, and they're on a conveyor system to remove manure sort of on a daily cycle. So we've inspected 6 farms in September, and the remainder will be inspected by the end of October. So early findings include problems with oil storage. A couple of them, the free range units, the ranging areas have streams through them, and those streams are not fenced off. And a sort of general issue with manure management plans not being followed, or not the farmers not being clear on what the plans say. So we've been talking to them all about improvements, and those have been agreed with the farmers. Alongside that, we've been issuing sort of giving them contact details for advisory bodies, pointing them in the direction of that. There's free soil testing available, for instance, through Farming Connect. So there's ways that we can provide advice to farmers. We don't have the same regulations, the water regulations that have been mentioned in Wales. So we're giving advice under the Code of Good Agricultural Practice. And it's my intention, I've not done it yet, but I've had the letter, thank you, from Jenny, that has gone out to the English Lug farmers on soil management, and we'll put a sort of Welsh version out to all the Wales farmers that operate in the Lug catchment, so that we are joined up and working together with EA. I think that's quite important. Okay.
Thank you
both. Anything you want to add, Dan?
Chris O'Brien and Simon Evans. So Chris.
Thank you. Just a plea to Anne, really, to speak with local planning authorities around the policy which comes out of the evidence. The way in which the conservation objectives are worded towards restoration means that neutrality might not be enough. So we need to be really careful, and I think working towards that together and agreeing a policy would be really welcomed.
Yeah, it's our intention. I mean, this is really an early heads up for you guys, and there will be conversations to be had with all of those planning authorities as time goes on.
Thank you. Simon Evans.
Anne, thank you. Also, I'm going to have a look at this, but I'm not quite sure how a unit can get planning when it's got a stream running through the range area. That beggars belief, I'm afraid. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both very much for that update.
Can I ask a question as well? Sorry,
I have a lot of welcome information. Who's speaking?
It's Mark Willimont. Sorry, I can't put a blue hand up because I'm a host. Yeah. Could I, obviously I welcome the comment, I think, from Anne about recognition that the lug is an SSSI but drains into an SAC. So I'm assuming, therefore, you're going to be considering, from a habitat risk assessment point of view, impacts upon anything from a planning point of view and anything that's permitted. But the question I think that I was going to ask was, there was a horrendous pollution incident in the Upper Wye, wasn't there, at the Llanffi? I'm aware that when we last asked, we weren't able to have any information on that. I was just wondering if there was any update to the board, because although we were reassured it was diluted by the time it got to the River Wye, dispersed or whatever, it again, it's concerning that if something's happened upstream to us, what's happening? Has there been some regulation? Is there going to be a case coming forward from that?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, it's very difficult to talk about a live investigation, and I obviously clearly can't discuss companies or individuals that we might be investigating. So all I can say is that investigation is ongoing. We were quite confident that that the Llanffi was the flows on the Llanffi during the incident were very low, and the dilution that it receives in the Wye, we were pretty confident that pretty sort of close to that confluence there was little or no evidence of that pollution in the main Wye. So the impact on the Wye was very small. But all I can say about the investigation, it's still ongoing. We have a process to follow where we need to sort of seek legal advice and do evidence tests before we can have any prosecutions signed off. So that process is ongoing, and I'm afraid you're going to have to sort of trust me and sort of say I can't really speak sort of specifically about that investigation.
Okay, so thank you. That's just helpful. It's just obviously it's regulation that keeps coming up, and if an incident like that does happen, and if we do know who caused it and it isn't dealt with, then I suppose it doubts the teeth that regulation has, and the disincentive. But that's the point really I wanted to make. But I'm pleased to hear that it's still ongoing. Thank you. Yeah,
I mean, since the incident, I should say, we are now sort of exploring the use of some data sondes or passive monitors on the Llanffi as well, just to give us a little bit more reassurance about the condition of that river going forward.
Thank you. Mary Albright.
Thank you, Alyssa. I was just going to ask Anne, is your proposed moratorium based on all developments or just housing developments?
We're not proposing a moratorium. I mean, we're not proposing a moratorium. We're proposing to issue advice to local planning authorities for any developments that might have the potential to generate any additional phosphate into that catchment.
Thank you. I'm just mindful of the time that we do have. This is obviously the public take a very welcome and active interest in this. So just to sort of, if you could bear that in mind, so that there's plenty of time for public questions at the end, please. So the next update is from Dare Cymru, Welsh Water.
Yeah, I can give a quick update. Sorry, I can't put video on. My IT doesn't seem to allow it. We're continuing feasibility and design of 11 wastewater treatment works with pea removal schemes that are in the Wye and Lug. And then we're also working with the Wye and Usk Foundation on potential wetland sites at Dilwyn and Cannon Pion. For these two sites, we're in discussions with the EA to understand permitting, sampling and monitoring requirements, and also looking at what we need to do for our outfall to fit in with the wetlands design. Other area we're looking at was starting effluent pea sampling at other wastewater treatment works where there's potential wetland sites that are being looked at by Herefordshire. So we've got some so we can start gathering some data of what's actually coming out of these works. And we're also starting that sampling at sites that have been identified in Natural Resources Wales and Pay NEP in the Upper Wye catchment. I think there's 7 sites there that we're looking at, which will come under some of the things that Anne was talking about, the tighter limits that have been set in Wales at 2015. They are already being looked at in the next 5-year period from 2025 to 2030. So we're gathering evidence on those to see what their impact will be. And that's about it from me.
It's very, very good. Got any questions on that? So the next report would have been from Nick Reed from Harm Herefordshire. Nick sent his apologies, but he'd sent a brief summary, which is to say that they have met virtually. They're planning events. They had a constructive, no pun intended, meeting with Mary Albright, and that are looking for a further engagement with the full steering group meeting, which is likely to meet at the end of October. So the next update will be from the NFU. Sarah?
Yeah, so locally within the West Midlands, we've had a meeting of the West Midlands Poultry Board. So that's made up of poultry producers from across the region, but quite a heavy representation from Herefordshire there, where we discussed the situation with the Wye specifically. There's an awful lot of interest, obviously, from poultry producers within the catchment, but also within the Ryder region. So we've had a good discussion there about the current situation and, you know, what that means for producers, you know, and measures that potentially could be taken. So that's positive. And then as a result of that, we're now looking at organising our winter webinar programme, because obviously everything is going to be web-based going forward. But we are going to do a specific meeting on the phosphate issues around the River Wye for our wider membership within Herefordshire. So that's something that will be happening. I haven't got a specific date, but probably November, December this year. I think that's probably it, because obviously it's been a quiet period for us because it's harvest and it's not a time of year when we tend to do a lot of communication with our members. I think Ian has just got something to say on some of the work that's been done nationally.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Just wanted to really give a flavour of what's happening in another part of the country regarding nutrient management. Some of you may already be aware that the NFU is leading work down in the southwest, in the Ball Harbour region, to establish a nutrient trading scheme. And that's got some really good buy-in from a lot of the farmers in the region. Sort of 90–95% have indicated their interest in taking part at the moment. And yeah, we're working with the Environment Agency down there and the local water company to develop that. We're in the scoping stage at the moment, so quite early stages, but we've recruited a new employee to sort of drive the scoping stage forward for the next year. And we've also secured the funding to do that work. So yeah, that's in the early stages, a sort of alternative approach down there, but it's got some good buy-in, and yeah, it's promising for the future, I think.
Great, thank you very much. Peter Morris, you have a hand up?
Yeah, just wanted to check. So it's a sort of representation point from the NFU. I believe, I think it's John Davis, chair of NFU, has shown an interest in this group. So I don't know my way around structures and how organisations are set up, but with Sarah and Ian, is there any overlap there, or is that possibly an extra invite that we need to make as we move forward with this group?
Well, I'm West Midlands, so I cover Herefordshire. Ian is national. I believe an invitation has gone out to NFU Cymru, but the issue there is resourcing it. So yes, if we could have a conversation with John, I'll follow that up with my side. That would be really good to have a farmer on the board.
Yeah, I think that's fine. That's all I need to know, that somebody follows that up with John. That would be really helpful, Sarah.
If you could put your hand down, Mr. Morris, thank you. Okay. HCILG, welcome to the board. And it's your opportunity to give us maybe introduce yourself and anything that's been happening.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I am the co-chair of the lobby group with Jim Hicks, who's also here, but we're going to divvy up the speaking parts. The Herefordshire Construction Industry Lobby Group was established in November 2019 in a direct response to the housing moratorium which was issued by the council last October. The moratorium was issued without warning or consultation, and so understandably took the industry by shock. But this shock galvanised a fairly disparate group of people to come together and try and do something. By way of an overview, the lobby group represents a wide range of Herefordian individuals and businesses working within the planning, design and construction sector. This ranges from architects and planning agents to surveyors, ecologists, bricklayers, manufacturers, carpenters, electricians, etc. I would estimate that we represent tens of thousands of jobs within the county and generate hundreds of millions of county revenue and inward investment. The lobby group members have projects covering a diverse portfolio, including single family homes, self and custom build projects, small rural developments, rural diversification projects, care homes, affordable housing, education and tourism projects. It's worth noting, though, that we do not have any large, major industrial or particularly controversial development schemes in our collective portfolio. So the current moratorium is not protecting the river from the large multinationals or projects that would probably cause harm to the county in other terms. It's actually preventing the better end of the development spectrum coming forward, and specifically harming locally based businesses and individuals. It's actually preventing a large part of the county from contributing positively to sustainable and much needed growth. Before the moratorium, the Herefordshire construction sector was a vibrant, sustainable, self-sufficient and viable industry characterised by a diverse collection of small, medium and micro businesses, many of which are family-run specialists working exclusively in Herefordshire. It's an industry that Herefordshire should probably be proud of and keen to foster and protect, not least because it contributes significantly to the county coffers and the wider economy and skill set. We are as vulnerable as our agricultural colleagues to the effects of flooding, pandemics and the weather, and work closely with the agricultural sector, who are our clients, our customers, our friends and neighbours. Development actually primarily takes place on land that the farmers wish to sell and develop, so our futures are inextricably linked, likewise our approach to the pollution incidents. But there is no polite way to say this. The moratorium has decimated our sector, and we feel most strongly that it is unfair, unjust, and ultimately ineffective with regard to restoring water quality. Since establishing the lobby group, we have tried to approach the issue, and I'm going to steal a line from the planning office here, with a proactive, positive, and collaborative attitude. I believe and hope we have offered ourselves as willing partners and supporters to every other agency on this board. And we have endeavoured to learn all that we can about rivers, phosphates and processes in quite a short time scale. We have written to and spoken to as many people as humanly possible in an effort to unearth data or navigate a pathway to resolution, often by asking the annoying questions and chasing answers or possible alternatives. But I would like to reassure all of you who have been on the receiving end of our endless emails and questions that both Jim and I are typically less annoying than we might seem at the moment. However, it is hugely frustrating from a professional and personal perspective that effectively we are all in the same position 12 months after the moratorium was issued and 6 years after the board was set up. So what have the lobby group done? We've actually self-funded our own QC council advice at the very early stages before we knew about the apportionment detail. And we were just checking whether a moratorium can actually be issued and sustained on an industry like ours. And it turns out that that probably can happen, but our QC was keen to point out that it should be based on sound evidenced reasoning and should not be used to punish one party or one sector disproportionately. And I'll come back to this point because I feel it is crucial. Jim and I and other members of the group have also met with Bill Wiggin and Jessie Norman MP several times, including a useful meeting yesterday, which we undertook with Herefordshire Council as partners, where we have negotiated some clear actions working towards government intervention. And this would be similar to the intervention they have taken in Hampshire, which has been successful. I would like to think, however, that this board can look at lifting the moratorium based on the evidence and actions you've already taken, without the government having to step in with the associated scrutiny that this will attract. We've also worked closely with lots of different Herefordshire Council officers to establish a greater understanding of the Natural England neutrality demands and to try and negotiate some clarification regarding alternative drainage solutions such as drainage mounds and private drainage arrangements. We will continue to push for positive outcomes for projects that can show neutrality and others that might need more creative interpretations. And we've also worked with several councillors to try and communicate the impact of this moratorium and find areas of common ground that can be used to both drive forward solutions and hopefully help protect jobs, revenue, skills and the environment. We continue to work closely with Mark and Alyssa, and hopefully we're instrumental in helping to secure the funding for the phosphate issue through the use of the New Homes bonus pot. I think this is important. This is the primary funding source for the actions proposed to restore water quality, and it comes from new homes. So for every house Herefordshire Council deliver, the government reward them with an amount of money. And this money has been allocated to find solutions. It has also been used to help support the application for the LEP funding. So new homes do bring benefits, not just negatives. But the moratorium has sadly prevented Herefordshire Council from securing any further new homes bonus. If we don't build homes, we won't get the money. Lobby group members have also worked with Simon and the WUF on private integrated wetland proposals and stand ready to be the customer of the trading platform, as well as being the people who own the land that will bring them forward. Our members represent those landowners with interests in both the council and wetland schemes, many of whom are farmers with housing developments themselves stuck in the moratorium. We're also investigating land use changes where members might buy parcels of land to take out of intensive production and hopefully bring forward reductions. All of this, I hope, illustrates to you the importance of new homes as a fundamental cog in the greater machine. Since last December, we have urged Herefordshire Council to commission the calculator tool in the interim plan and possibly adopt a more flexible temporary position statement while other data is collected and actions are determined and quantified. Latterly, we have been asking Herefordshire Council and Natural England to consider if the moratorium is justified now the apportionment data has changed and the low-level housing delivery figures are known. Jim and I feel it is important to clarify that the lobby group represents potential new homes in the county and not the existing population of roughly 87,000 homes whose drainage concerns are largely serviced by Welsh Water. The 20 to 25% of phosphate loading attributed to housing relates to existing homes, not new homes. New homes are the buildings with water use restrictions already enforced, and they are the ones implementing SUDs, and they have often have private drainage for foul and storm, preventing unnecessary runs to the sewage treatment works. So in effect, the moratorium is preventing all the good stuff. Recent county delivery figures would suggest that on average in the past 9 years, Herefordshire has delivered just 500 to 600 homes per annum. This means we are not only specifically behind our target, and the moratorium will exacerbate this, but it also means we can quantify how much percentage we believe new homes would deliver. If we extrapolate the apportionment data and assume that new homes are part of the 23 to 25% pie, it would suggest that on average, new homes contribute 0.1% of the phosphate loading in the river. Surely this is negligible and does not justify a wholesale moratorium on new homes. I've nearly finished, am I? A year's worth of housing has been lost. Whilst this might be music to some ears, it does have other costs that we need to bear in mind. On a rough estimation, conservatively, Herefordshire has now lost more than £300 million of inward investment, lost new homes bonus, lost council tax, lost Section 106 monies, lost infrastructure investment and improvements, which is paid for by new development. It's lost jobs, it's got less business rates, less opportunities. We, and I mean the collective county rather than the industry, the construction industry, simply cannot afford this loss, not when it's proven not to be helping the river secure favourable conditions. Whilst a planned moratorium with a proven positive impact upon water quality might be digestible, we currently have a situation where one minor contributor in just one small section of the SAC is being penalised too hard and for too long. We cannot help but feel we're suffering because of a knee-jerk reaction at the beginning, and this might need to change now more data is known. It is unclear who and how and why we will lift this moratorium, but I think it is time for us all to consider doing so. I would like to propose that the board considers a motion to suspend the moratorium immediately until a fairer way of distributing the solutions can be found and evidenced.
Thank you, Mary. That's not within the board's purview, but it's a good try.
Worth a go.
Yeah, but please believe that we hear you. We know what's going on. It's unspeakable, and I'm very sorry. Yeah. But thank you for articulating that on behalf of your members so powerfully and well.
I just thought it was worth reiterating that new homes that we're stopping, there's such a tiny amount of this problem that we need to discuss it more widely, because otherwise we can't move forward, and there's every chance this moratorium will come back. It'll be a bounce back moratorium that every now and again.
Well, I think, yes, but that's about getting it right here.
Yeah.
That we get it right now. We put in place the right measures. And I think we're all on board with that. I'm feeling quite positive about it, and welcome to the board. It's very lovely to have you on the board. So I am mindful of the time and that we have public questions. Can I just ask, what is the length of the presentation on trading platforms? Gail.
Sorry, it's probably about 10 minutes. I can keep it quite short. I'm happy if you wish to take it to the next TAG meeting or something.
Yeah, is that possible? Because it's really important to me that we have enough time for the public questions.
Absolutely.
So my apologies, Gail. We'll give you a good crack next time.
No, that's fine.
If that's okay. Thank you very much for your understanding and forbearance. So we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is questions from the public. And I have a question from Richard Garnett, member of the public. Richard, you're on mute. Is it possible to unmute Richard?
No, I'm here. Thank you, Councillor. Hi.
You're welcome.
Fascinating to listen to the discussion, but I'm slightly frustrated in that much of the debate has been centering on how to measure and attribute the problem once it's arrived in the river, rather than diverting it at source and stopping the leaching of these nutrients into the catchments before they even become a problem. I'd like to see some measure of debate and conversation over how these nutrients can be prevented from entering the catchment at source.
Thank you, Mr. Garnett. I think, to be fair, there is a lot of effort goes into that, principally with, I suppose the two main things: the point source pollution, which is the investment from Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water, is having very quantifiable benefits, and so stopping the phosphate entering watercourses at that point. The other is agricultural diffuse pollution, and I think we did a fair amount of the chats have been about what we call voluntary measures, which is things that the farmers maybe undertaking in order to reduce, for instance, soil loss, where you will get soil and phosphate leaving a field because of the steepness of the topography and so on and so forth. So there is effort going on there. I think we don't just talk about everything at every meeting, if you see what I mean. This meeting we're looking at the plan and those areas that we felt we needed to strengthen within the plan. Has anyone got anything that they'd like to add to that in terms of addressing the sources and dealing with the phosphate before it gets in the river? Dave Throop.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, really, just to elaborate on that a little bit. We have put a huge amount of work into trying to work out where the sources, the primary sources of phosphate are, and that goes right down to almost a field, well, no, to a field level. So in terms of working out where it originates, how it transports itself, whether it goes down roads, whether it's over land flows, all that kind of stuff. So there is a huge amount of modelling, of research, of actual field work, of farm visits, which is exactly about that thing. We know that the majority of the phosphate is now coming from various sources of agricultural diffuse pollution, and we've got a pretty good understanding now of how it mobilises itself and makes its way into the rivers. The challenge now is to prevent those, and that's a lot of the work that's going on through farm advice and through our regulatory activity.
If I may, a quick follow-up. Many of the measurements that are indicated in the model are not actual measurements, are they? They're more modelling expectations.
Yes, that is correct. You know, if you are modelling things over a whole catchment, then you are making certain assumptions and relying on the model. The models are pretty robust. I think they are pretty well tried and tested. But we do a lot of calibration then in terms of field work and actual on the ground work, particularly in high priority areas. So areas of high slope and mobile soils, that sort of stuff.
Do you think we'll reach a point though where we can start to attribute kilograms per metre cubed or grams per metre cubed right the way along the catchment, so that we can actually, until we can actually measure this pollution, we can't actually manage it?
I think that you will always be making assumptions. We are doing research into different types of soil, different types of farming activity, that sort of stuff, and we've got various research projects going on with universities over that. Whether you will ever arrive at a very precise field by field calculator, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it would be a big challenge.
What concerns
Thank you, Mr. Garnett. No, sorry, Mr. Garnett, that you've had 4 questions, I think, is enough already. Other people want to ask questions as well. Thank you. Okay, next member of the public, I have Lydia and Tom. Hello,
yes, thank you very much for...
Can you just introduce yourself? I'm pretty sure your name's probably not Lydia.
Hello, Councillor Swinglehurst. I'd be delighted to introduce myself to the board. Let me speak. My name is Tom Tibbetts. I am a cider fruit grower and cider maker. I live in Herefordshire, and my local watercourse is the Hardwick Brook. But I'm calling into this meeting today, not because you want to know about my farming activities, but because I am very concerned, as you all are, about the Nutrient Management Board's progress. And I do have a few questions, and do forgive me, but they're all important, and they will culminate in a suggestion. The first thing I want to know is what exactly does neutrality mean? Because phosphate is either there or it isn't. And it's not geologically sourced because it's highly soluble. So any stuff in the rocks has been long since washed out by the rain. So if we're finding phosphate in the environment, it's generally speaking coming out of the back ends of animals or humans, or being applied to the field in chemical form by farmers with fertilizers. So that's my first question. What is actually neutrality? You can't put negative phosphate into the environment in order to remove it. There's no such thing. Secondly, I really want to drill into the sampling frequency. As a bit of background, I'm a physicist by training, and so I understand a little bit about statistics, maybe more than most people. And it strikes me that where you have a highly soluble nutrient in watercourses which flow at a finite speed into the sea, i.e. within 48 hours, something emitted into the Llanvi will be in the sea at Chepstow or the Severn Estuary. How is a monthly or quarterly sampling frequency in any way going to give you the statistical sampling error, small enough statistical sampling error, that you actually know that the measurements you've made are telling you anything useful whatsoever? next question. Oh, yeah, no, I'll bring that one up later. Oh dear, one other question. When planning decisions are made about intensive agricultural units, and it does strike me that the word intensive is really the critical thing here. Intensive agricultural units, particularly in Paris, are the cumulative effects of these planning decisions considered? Because I know full well that each individual planning application is considered on its own merits. And, you know, the Natural Resources Wales even publishes number 19, guidance number 19, how to get an intensive poultry unit through planning is literally what that guidance is called, issued by Natural Resources Wales. So, you know, the regulators giving farmers advice on how to make this happen, but nobody seems to be worried about whether the cumulative effects of phosphate leakage is having a bad effect. I would contend that it obviously is. So finally, the overarching theme in today's meeting has been, we don't have the data, we don't know, we don't really know what's happening, where's the phosphate coming from? We've got models, and we're told that they're calibrated and they're robust, but we don't have the data. Now, I visited the AGM of the Local Enterprise Partnership yesterday and asked them for £10,000. I'm a member also of the newly formed Friends of the Upper Wye group. We are all members of public, but we're all deeply concerned about the Wye. And I asked them for £10,000 for a pilot project, which we have planned, for citizens science-based phosphate sampling across the catchment. The way it works is that we have handheld monitoring kits with an accuracy of only plus or minus 40 micrograms per litre, but that is better than nothing. And we can go into the field, or one of our extensive group can go into the field, collect samples, and then make measurements. And I've been measuring the Hardwick Brook since mid-August. And I can tell you that the minimum measurement I have made in that time is 108 micrograms per litre. That is some 3.5 times the accepted safe limit. And the maximum measurement I took was 490 micrograms per litre, which is, well, 12 or 13 times what it should be. It has not, in that time that I've been monitoring, gone under 100 micrograms per litre. And that is just one brook. So what I want to do, and mindful of the fact that earlier in the meeting, I was made aware by Mark Willimont that Herefordshire Council is desperate to spend £600,000 by the 31st of March 2021. I'd like to reiterate the request I made to the Local Enterprise Partnership Board meeting yesterday, which was for £10,000. Will you fund the Friends of the Upper Wye to the tune of £10,000? And with it, we are going to acquire further Hanna Instruments handheld phosphate monitoring kits. We are hoping that we can liaise with people like Dave Throop at the Environment Agency for advice and guidance on how to make these measurements as robust as possible. And we will then go out into the field and form tributary teams.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Mr. Tibbets. So I've got, I think probably the bulk of this needs to go to Dave Throop, EA, neutrality, sampling, data, citizen science, and then one for NRW, cumulative impact.
Neutrality I will have to throw at Natural England, but a lot of what you've just said, you know, real music to my ears. I think in my piece I said that we are really keen to join up with citizen science and to get as much data as we can possibly get into our monitoring programs. You are right that sticking a pot in a river 12 times a year is not necessarily going to give you a really valid estimate of what's going on. So the more data we can get, the better. In terms of the £10,000, we probably need to take that out of the meeting, but certainly I would very much like to discuss that element with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, somebody from Natural England wants to pick up on neutrality for us, please.
Yes, it's Joanna here. Can you hear me? Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a slight confusion in how the term's being used. So neutrality is a term that's used in a development sense. So when a development shows nutrient neutrality, it means that it's not putting any more phosphate back into the river, then it's not adding to the phosphate in the river, to your baseline of the phosphate in the river. So there's mitigation within the development itself in some form, so that that phosphate generated by that development is taken out. I think you're understanding the term in a slightly wider sense, but that's not how it's used. It's used in a sort of development specific sense. I don't know whether that helps.
So does neutrality mean basically zero phosphate emission from that development?
Yeah, from that particular development, yeah.
Okay, so and then cumulative impact, NRW or Peter Morris, who wants to take that in Paris?
Are you still on the line, Peter?
Yeah,
I am.
Oh, we're getting very confused. I'll mute for a minute, Peter. You go ahead for a minute.
Yeah, three of us at once. Yes, cumulative impact or in combination effects, they are considered as part of the habitats regulation assessment work that we do. Clearly going forward, we've got to have a discussion now when NRW, when you complete your work around the results that you're finding. So, but yes, they're part of the planning process. We're obviously being accused by lots of people that they're not part of it, but, and again, it should be considering all forms of development. It's anything that adds phosphate. Again, it's not just another poultry unit that might be in operation on one that's planned, but it's considering all development that could contribute, all sources again. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Thank you, Mr. Tibbets. And I do hope that you'll be able to have a conversation with Dave Throop outside the meeting and pick up on the citizen science, which I think we're all very keen on. Thank you very much.
What about the
Helen? Sorry.
£10,000, Chair. We want to get
we'll take that outside the meeting. If that's all right.
If I could just say, I only have the governance to spend in relation to wetlands or to repurposing, rewilding. We haven't got the governance to spend any of that money, I'm afraid, in supporting a monitoring system, even though it might be a very grand idea. So I suggest perhaps take that up with Dave Throop, but it's a very good try.
But do pick it up with Dave Throop. I think he'd be very keen. So thank you very much. Helen Hamilton.
Thank you. I have got a couple of questions, if I may. I'll try to keep them as brief as possible. The first one is about the action plan. What I would have liked to see in the action plan, or just see in practice generally, is a better sources of information for planning decision making, and that includes planning enforcement. So what I'm seeing as a planner and monitoring what's going on in Paris and in Herefordshire is that there are a lot of developments that are falling through the cracks and not being assessed. And so these would, for example, be silage clamps that are going through under prior notifications, and because officers don't understand what the impacts of those are, they don't require, they allow them under prior notification without requiring any control over siting and design. And similarly, we're seeing quite a lot of, and this is a sort of a roll-on effect of anaerobic digestion, which could have been or should have been thought about when those permissions were granted, as the silage clamps are. And that is, we're seeing quite a lot of buildings being converted from general agricultural buildings to livestock buildings. And when talking to the planning enforcement team about those, they do not understand that that is development that potentially requires planning permission, because, well, I won't go into planning reasons for it, but we have got a problem where the planning enforcement team does not understand that it can take enforcement action and require planning permissions that would enable them to control the impacts and the risks to the SAC of those developments. So what I'd like to see in the action plan, or what I'd like to see in the planning departments generally, is much more education about what the impacts of these type of developments are. We've got an awful lot of detail about and procedures for residential development, and agricultural development is just slipping through the cracks. So that's my first request. Can you have a look at that in the action plan?
Okay.
My second question is about the technical advisory group. I'm not involved in the technical advisory group, and I'd really like more information about what it is, who it is, what its role is, because my understanding of a technical advisory group would be that it is composed of experts who have particular expertise or knowledge to bring to the party, technical expertise, I mean. And from what I'm understanding of the composition of the technical advisory group is it seems to have, organisations on it who potentially have have motivations other than just finding technical solutions. So I'd really like to understand who decides who becomes a member of the technical advisory group, what qualifications members bring to the party, and exactly what its role is.
The composition of technical advisory group is up to the board. So you have to be, the board has to elect you, as it were, as far as my awareness of it. And for the most part, the technical advisory group was what it was when I took over chairing. The change being now the inclusion of H. Kilgour. And I think, in a sense, is possibly the point is that these, where there is a problem, there is a solution, and who are the people who might be able to offer those solutions or come up with things that would then be developed into the plan. But I'm quite happy for anyone else to chip in on that one.
So, Chair, shall I just come in just to say I can send the terms of reference to yourself, Helen, if you like. From memory, and I know Kevin Singleton knows it better than I, he's on this call, I think, but it's chaired either by the Environment Agency or by Natural England. I guess it could therefore, in theory, be chaired also by NRW, who perform the same roles. And it tends to be represented by the tier down, if you like, of the board. It tends to be the technical expertise of each organisation. So so you tend to get experts, you tend to get Natural England's expert and Environment Agency's expert, etc. on this sitting there, and there tends to be about one person per organisation. It meets just usually before the actual board meeting, but I could take on that action to send that on if you like.
I think it'd be helpful. And just we are about to run over time. I'm happy to stay on. But obviously it's chair's discretion, and I would like to know that everyone's had their question answered. So just to warn you, we're going to run over. The question, the point you're making about, as it were, gap analysis in planning. Does anyone want to pick that up? I think that's quite an intriguing suggestion. Maybe something for the tag to discuss at the next meeting.
I don't know if we still got Kevin Bishop on the call. I prefer
is that something that you could make a note of, Mr. Lamont? And
yeah, I mean there was. I think it was considered.
Because I would like to know a bit more. Have a bit more around. Oh, he's Mr. Bishop.
There you are. Kevin be better. He's more qualified in planning. I'm not a planner in my background.
Well, I am a planner, yes. So we can take that forward and discuss that. It's an ongoing matter which Helen Hamilton has brought up with the enforcement team, but we can take that matter forward and look at that.
It might be an interesting exercise to look at that. Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. It's very helpful. Okay. So, Councillor Jeremy Milne.
Yes, thank you. We'll be relieved to have only just the one question, Chair, and it is it's one I think possibly for Dave Throop or David Lee. On the enforcement side. So when the EA or the NRW have their boots on the ground and they identify the diffuse source breach and become aware, and obviously I do have in mind a particular case, but I'm not going to identify it because this is not not a room for naming and shaming, but they become aware that the land in question is in a stewardship scheme or a Tír Gofal scheme, mid-tier scheme, whatever, is there a mechanism whereby reference is made to the RPA? We've not talked about the place of the RPA, the Royal Payments Agency, because frankly, I mean, as a politician, there's nothing that irritates the voter more than becoming aware of pollution from farmland that is in receipt of public money, apparently for environmental benefit. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll take that for England. Yes, we do refer to the RPA for any significant issue, and that may be either a breach of farming rules for water, or even a breach of the guidelines, so the non-statutory guidelines. So yes, we can and we do refer RPA to the RPA fairly regularly. It's not in our control what the RPA do with that information once it's been referred.
And it's exactly the same for NRW with the Rural Inspectorate Wales. We will contact them. We routinely talk to them about our inspection programme and pass breaches over to them. And again, like Dave says, it's for them to take action if they choose to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mill. And to use up the fact that you didn't have a second question, I'm going to just ask quickly, does referral to the RPA in either case in any way inhibit your ability to enforce and have sanctions?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, in Wales either.
Thank you. Right, so next member of the public is Alison Caffin.
Could I make one addition to that?
Yes, son.
WAF works with a lot of farmers, and we're aware of one case of RPA enforcement, which was actually a farmer who fenced off his river. And he lost his area payment in his high level scheme because he had put 0.3 hectares behind a fence. And that's the only case that we've ever come across of an RPA enforcement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Alison Caffin.
So it's Alison Caffin from Cardiff University. Hi, two questions, please. One is about the plan and one of the items in the plan. Sorry, there aren't page numbers or action numbers, but it's I wondered if anyone could give some more information about the action point on reviewing whether the planning system is considering risks posed by different sectors in an equitable way. It's rather opaque wording, and I just wondered whether someone could explain that a bit more. And the second point is, there's been lots of really useful discussion today about different sorts of monitoring and digging out some of this very difficult data and evidence. But it's a question I've raised before, is has the TAG explored the feasibility of doing research on catchment or sub-catchment scale on the manure production and use? It links in with comments earlier about the amounts of phosphate or the trading scheme in phosphate, or the points about where do the nutrients come from. But there could be calculations done on the manure generated by livestock businesses annually, getting the figures from the AD units on how much they take and from the manure traders on how much they export from the area. You're not going to get precise levels, but it would be an important part of that bigger picture on where are these nutrients coming from, as well as how they're being applied to land. And I just wondered whether some research could be done to that as well.
Thank you. So we've got left. We've got two questions there. One on if we started at the point of the production of manure, and we could quantify that, would that give us some clearer line of evidence in the plan? And the other is the equitable approach to planning. So does anyone want to take up on either of those? Mary?
So you won't be surprised to hear me say that the lobby group would suggest quite strongly that there isn't any parity in the approach to different sectors contributing towards the pollution. And I agree that if we can quantify people's phosphate pollution, we can quantify agricultural generation of phosphate as well.
Yeah, the figures may be known or knowable. That's what I would be interested in. Simon, do you have an answer for that?
Well, I've tried to do this on the Curlbrook as part of a Natural England funded facilitation program where we worked with not quite all, there were 2 that we're not working with, but all bar 2 of the farmers. And we tried to look at, it's also got one of the highest densities of chickens in Europe, that catchment. And we tried to look at the phosphate budget for the catchment in terms of phosphate in, phosphate out. And then we had a sonde in the river that tried to monitor to show phosphate lost. And what I can say from this is that the soil is this enormous reservoir of phosphate that periodically burps, basically. And there's no obvious correlation between phosphate in and phosphate out in an intensively farmed catchment, but the phosphate levels in the Curlbrook are severely elevated, but you can't see in any one particular tributary because the phosphate's being moved around within the catchment, and the elevated levels are not representative of all the extra phosphate that's being used in the system. So the soil is holding on to an awful lot until periodically it lets it go.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Sorry, Alison, we're already 7 minutes over, but please put it in writing. We'll do our best to address it. Harvey. I have a Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Hello.
Hi, I just wanted to pick up on an earlier point about planning applications and offsetting, and I just wanted to get some clarity, possibly from some of the planning team on the meeting, whether we have a planning application, we've got permission, we've got a reserved matters in play, and we also farm. And I want to know that whether the planning team can compute an application by using FarmScoper to, on our farming practices in order to offset the phosphate emissions from the development. Is the planning team sort of able to compute that now, or are we still going to have to wait for the interim plan?
Thank you. I think that'd be one for Mr. Bishop, possibly.
Well, it's in conjunction with our ecologists in Natural England, as whether we'd have to have the information put in front of us for us to analyse and assess, and then see whether we can come out with a new neutrality with the information before us. But we have to have that information submitted to review that.
Right. So, as a matter of principle, our reserve matters application could be resolved through using the FarmScoper tool, as long as it was backed up by, proper, science.
If we can link that in with the application and have the appropriate information and there's enforceability on all that, then that's something which our ecologists can review.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Right. So that concludes the questions from the members of the public. Thank you all for your questions and your engagement with this issue. It's very important. So we'll move on to agenda item 7. Just to note that there will be member trainings for Herefordshire and Paris Council members on the 2nd of October. So I'm having a very full week of nutrient management stuff. The date of the next meeting, if we could, we thought maybe the 30th of November, in order to get the tweaks, as it were, to the plan through, and to pick up on Gail's trading platform that we've missed, if that would be agreeable. And is there any other business? Thank you. In that case, I'm now going to close the meeting. I thank you all very much for your attendance and participation. And can I ask that Democratic Services stops the live recording? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye all. Thank you.